multiverse is vast beyond comprehension, filled with countless realities where civilizations rise, wage war, and fall into darkness. But what happens when three apex predator species, each designed by their universe to dominate, collide in a single theater of war? When religious zealotry meets fascist pragmatism? When energy shields face endless waves of flesh? When alien hive minds disrupt the calculations of both? The answer is written in plasma fire, human blood, and chitinous corpses across a dying world. The planet had once been called Harvest Feiku by its human colonists, a cruel joke of nomenclature given its fate. Now it was designated P7743 by the Terran Federation and bore no name in the Covenant's holy records, merely coordinates marking another world where the human infestation had spread. The surface was a nightmare of torn earth and bioorganic structures. The Arachnids had been thorough. Massive holes punctured the crust like suppurating wounds, each leading to tunnel networks that honeycombed the planet's mantle. The original human settlements were nothing but dust and memory. In high orbit, the Terran Federation's 19th Fleet hung in defensive formation, 12 capital ships, 40 destroyers, and a fleet carrier that disgorged drop ships like a hive-spawning worker drones. Admiral Henryk Kowalski stood on the bridge of the TFS Roger Young, watching tactical displays with a detached calculation that came from losing 3 previous fleets to bug plasma. The Federation had committed 2 million mobile infantry to the surface operation. Acceptable casualties were projected at 60%. Command considered this optimistic. "Contact!" The sensor officer's voice cracked with youth. Multiple slip-space ruptures bearing 047, range 300,000 kilometers. Kowalski's jaw tightened. The bugs didn't have FTL capability. This was something new. Reality tore open like rotted fabric. The ruptures weren't the clean folds of Federation jump drives, but violent slashes that bled exotic radiation. Through them came vessels that made every officer on the bridge catch their breath. Ships that looked grown rather than built, their hulls smooth purple-gray metal with organic curves and glowing energy cores. The lead vessel dwarfed the Roger Young, a battlecruiser nearly 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons emplacements and surrounded by a faint shimmer of energy that made targeting sensors scream interference warnings. "Admiral, they're not responding to hails," communications reported. "Wait, receiving transmission, Sir, it's on all frequencies simultaneously. Audio and visual. Put it through." The main screen flickered. The face that appeared made several bridge officers reach instinctively for sidearms. It was reptilian, mandibles framing a mouth full of predatory teeth, eyes burning with intelligence, and something that might have been religious fervor. The creature wore ornate armor that pulsed with inner light, and when it spoke, the translation came through in perfect measured English, though the underlying tones suggested multiple vocal cords working in harmony. "Humans." The word dripped with contempt. "Your existence is an affront to the divine path, your presence a corruption of sacred space. I am Shipmaster Thel Vadami of the Fleet of Particular Justice, and I bring the Prophet's judgment. You will be cleansed." Kowalski had faced bug plasma spitters that could core a destroyer in 3 shots. He'd watched Klendathu swallow entire armies. This alien certainty triggered the same cold mathematics that had kept him alive through 5 years of war. "All ships, battle stations, launch all fighters, prepare nuclear." The Covenant fleet opened fire. Plasma torpedoes, brilliant spheres of superheated matter contained in magnetic bottles, lanced across the void at relativistic speeds. The first salvo struck the destroyer TFS Iwo Jima amidships. The vessel's hull, designed to withstand bug plasma, proved inadequate against weapons that operated on entirely different principles. The destroyer simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an expanding sphere of ionized metal and atomized crew. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire. Kowalski's voice cut through the bridge's shocked silence. All batteries, target the lead ship. The Federation fleet's response was immediate and massive. Hundreds of railgun rounds and missiles streaked toward the Covenant battlecruiser Pious Inquisitor. Kinetic penetrators that could punch through meters of bug carapace closed to impact distance and splashed harmlessly against a spherical energy shield that flared bright blue with each impact, dispersing kinetic energy across its entire surface. The Covenant vessel didn't even adjust course. "Shields holding at 97%, reported the sensor officer, voice hollow with disbelief. "Admiral, our weapons aren't penetrating." Below them, on P-7743's ravaged surface, Mobile Infantry Sergeant Johnny Rico crouched in a blast crater, watching the sky turn into a light show. His squad, what remained of it after 3 bug encounters in as many hours, had been dug in near the primary hive entrance designated Objective Zebra. The mission was simple in that uniquely Federation way. Advance into the tunnels, kill everything that moved, plant nuclear charges, and extract before detonation. Expected survival rate, 15%. "Sarge, what the hell is that?" Private Watkins pointed upward with his Merida rifle, where new stars were being born and dying in rapid succession. Rico had learned to trust his instincts on a dozen worlds. Right now, those instincts were screaming that the bug war had just become significantly more complicated. "Command, this is Rico's Roughnecks. We have visual on orbital engagement, requesting orders." Static crackled. Then, "All ground forces, hold position. Fleet engagement in progress with unknown hostile force. Stand by for..." The transmission cut off as something massive punched through P-7743's atmosphere. It was a Covenant assault carrier's drop pod, 30 meters of armored shell containing enough troops to overwhelm a city block. But it wasn't aiming for the human positions. It was heading directly for the largest hive entrance, 3 kilometers from Rico's position. The pod impacted with ground-shaking force, and its sides blossomed open like a metal flower. What emerged made Rico's combat-hardened mind struggle to process. Warriors in luminous armor, some standing 7 feet tall with energy shields visible around their bodies. They carried weapons that glowed with internal heat, and they moved with predatory grace that spoke of generations bred for war. At their head was an elite in gold-trimmed armor, energy sword igniting in his hand, with a snap hiss that carried across the cratered landscape. He surveyed the battlefield with calculating eyes, taking in both human positions and the hive entrance. Then the ground beneath them exploded. Arachnid warriors, each the size of a small car, all chitin and slashing limbs and mandibles that could sever a human in half, erupted from concealed tunnels. They'd been waiting, as they always did, with the patient hunger of their kind. Dozens became hundreds, became thousands. A living tide of biological killing machines responding to hive mind directives. The elite roared something in his own language, a battle cry that needed no translation, and his troops opened fire. Plasma bolts, superheated to temperatures that made bug carapace flash cook and explode, tore into the Arachnid swarm. Where Federation bullets required dozens of hits to drop a warrior bug, Covenant plasma took limbs off with single shots. Elite warriors moved through the swarm like dancers, energy swords carving through chitin as if it were paper. Grunts, shorter aliens in triangular methane masks, squeaked battle cries and threw plasma grenades that turned clusters of bugs into smoking craters. But the bugs kept coming. They always kept coming. "Sarge?" Watkins's voice held the edge of panic every trooper felt facing a bug rush. "What do we do?" Johnny Rico watched aliens fight bugs with technology that made Federation weapons look like primitive clubs. He watched an elite dodge a warrior bug strike, drive an energy sword through its brain, and execute a grunt that had strayed too far from formation, all in the span of 3 seconds. He watched plasma and chitin, shields and mandibles, religious zealotry and biological imperative collide in a battle that would determine whether humanity had any chance of survival. He made the calculation every mobile infantry sergeant learned. When facing multiple enemies, sometimes the best tactic was letting them kill each other first. "We dig in?" Rico said, chambering a fresh magazine. "And we watch. Command's going to want intelligence on these new players. If we're lucky, they'll soften each other up before we have to engage." Above them, the fleet battle intensified. The pious Inquisitor had destroyed 4 more Federation ships, but the remaining vessels had begun coordinating fire, concentrating on single points of the Covenant shields. It wasn't elegant, but the Federation had never valued elegance over effectiveness. Thousands of rounds hammered the same shield section until, for just a moment, it flickered. One nuclear warhead punched through. The detonation was a miniature sun, brief and terrible. When the glare faded, the Covenant battlecruiser's shields were down, and a section of hull showed blackened scoring. It wasn't destroyed, but it was hurt. Shipmaster Thel Vadami studied the tactical display, mandibles tight with grudging respect. These humans fought without honor, but with a ruthlessness that commanded attention. They threw their vessels into the grinder, accepting catastrophic losses to achieve any advantage. It was distasteful, effective, but distasteful. "Recall all ground forces," he ordered. "Prepare glassing beam. If these humans wish to claim this world, let them claim ashes." But before the order could be executed, his sensor officer reported something that changed everything. "Shipmaster, energy spike from the surface, multiple sources. It's plasma, not Covenant precision weapons, but crude biological cannons that spit superheated fluid in arcing trajectories, erupted from concealed positions across P7FMOR3. Tanker bugs, each the size of a building, launched their payload toward orbit. The Federation fleet scattered, but the Covenant vessel, shields depleted and engines damaged, couldn't evade fast enough. Bug plasma struck the pious Inquisitor's starboard side. Hull plating, designed to withstand nuclear fire, began to melt. Atmosphere vented from breached decks. Covenant crew died by the hundreds as entire sections decompressed. And on the surface, 3 armies, human, Covenant, and Arachnid, continued their brutal dance, none able to disengage, none willing to retreat, each committed to total victory or extinction. The battle for P7743 had only just begun. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together, or the pious Inquisitor hemorrhaged atmosphere and crew, but Shipmaster Thel Vadama refused to yield. His bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, rerouting power from non-essential systems to shield regeneration, while damage control teams sealed breached sections. The attack had been unexpected. These primitive organisms possessed weaponry capable of threatening starships. It was a miscalculation that stung his warrior's pride. "Status report," he commanded, his voice steady despite the bridge's emergency lighting casting harsh shadows across his features. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Shield generators at 40% capacity and regenerating. Casualty estimate, 300 warriors, 800 Ungoi, 50 Kigyar." The operations officer's mandibles twitched with barely suppressed rage. "Shipmaster, we were struck by animals." Thel studied the tactical display, his tactical mind already adapting. The human fleet maintained formation despite their losses. 7 capital ships destroyed. Yet they pressed the attack with mechanical determination. The surface showed something more troubling: massive biosignatures emerging from underground networks that sprawled beneath the entire continent. These Arachnids weren't a primitive infestation. They were a coordinated organism operating on a planetary scale. Bring shields to full power. Target those plasma-spitting creatures with precision strikes. And contact Fleet Master. Inform him we require additional battle groups. The words tasted like ash. Requesting reinforcements for what should have been a simple cleansing operation would raise questions about his competence. But honor demanded results over pride. The human fleet had pulled back to maximum engagement range, content to pepper the Covenant formation with long-range fire while their shields recovered. It was the correct tactical decision, which made Thel respect and loathe them in equal measure. These humans fought like Kig Yar, without honor, but with cunning that kept them alive. Admiral Kowalski watched the alien vessel's shields flicker back to operational status and resisted the urge to slam his fist against the command chair. 3 nuclear penetrations in 20 minutes, and the damn thing was still combat effective. Meanwhile, his fleet was down to 8 capital ships, and the bugs were turning the surface into a shooting gallery that threatened anything in low orbit. Analysis, he snapped at his tactical officer. Sir, their shields operate on a rotating modulation we haven't seen before. Once they adapt to our firing pattern, they distribute damage across the entire surface. We'd need to hit the same point with simultaneous strikes from multiple vectors. The lieutenant pulled up a simulation. Here, here, and here. Probability of achieving firing solution, 12%. And if we don't? They'll glass the planet within the hour, and we lack the firepower to stop them. Kowalski commanded ships through the Klendathu disaster. He'd watched good soldiers die by the thousands because intelligence underestimated bug numbers. The Federation had survived by adapting. By accepting that victory required sacrifice, most civilizations would consider obscene. Launch all remaining dropships. I want every mobile infantry unit on the surface concentrated at grid reference Zebra 7. That's where the aliens landed their ground forces. Sir, that will put our troops directly between the aliens and the bug hive. Casualty projections. I don't care about projections, Lieutenant. I care about results. Kowalski leaned forward, his scarred face set with grim determination. Those aliens are soldiers. Soldiers need supply lines, extraction points, command structure. The bugs will swarm them, and when both sides are exhausted from killing each other, our people will secure whatever technology we can salvage from the wreckage. The lieutenant's face went pale. You're using our troops as cleanup crew? I'm using our troops to win a war we're losing on 2 fronts. Execute the order. On P-7743's surface, Sergeant Rico and his squad had moved to higher ground, watching the 3-way engagement unfold with professional interest. The alien warriors, Covenant, if the broken transmissions they'd intercepted were accurate, fought with a coordination that reminded him of veteran mobile infantry, but with technology that belonged in propaganda vids about future warfare. An elite warrior dodged a bug warrior's mandible strike, rolled under a second attack, and came up with his energy sword carving through chitin in a blue-white arc. The bug's severed halves collapsed, ichor spraying across cracked earth. 2 more bugs rushed the elite from his flanks. He triggered his energy shield with a pulse that sent them flying backward, then finished both with plasma rifle shots that cooked them from the inside out. Jesus Christ, breathed Private Watkins. Sarge, we can't fight that. Rico had to agree. Every elite appeared to be worth a dozen mobile infantry in pure combat capability, and they had energy shields that made their armor effectively impenetrable to standard ammunition. The shorter aliens, grunts, based on their size and the way they operated in support roles, were less impressive but still carried weapons that vaporized bugs with single shots. But numbers told a different story. For every bug the Covenant killed, 3 more erupted from tunnel entrances. The aliens were being forced into a defensive formation around their landing zone, a perimeter that shrank by meters with each wave. Superior technology met endless biological reproduction, and biology was winning through sheer mathematical inevitability. "Contact left," Rico's point man shouted. A squad of Covenant grunts had broken from the main formation, fleeing a pursuing cluster of bugs. They squeaked in high-pitched panic, their triangular methane masks catching the light as they scrambled over debris. The bugs closed fast, mandibles clicking with hunger. Rico's training took over. "Open fire! Concentrate on the bugs!" 20 Morita rifles spoke in unison. Bullets tore into the pursuing Arachnids, not killing them outright, but slowing their charge, breaking limbs, creating precious seconds. The grunts realized they weren't under fire and dove behind a ruined structure, weapons raised but hesitant. One of the grunts, his armor marked with symbols that might have indicated rank, chittered something in his own language. Then, surprisingly, he spoke in broken but understandable English. "Human, help Ungoi? Why?" Rico kept his rifle trained on the grunt, but not aimed directly at him. "Because the bugs are everyone's problem. You got a name?" "Yayap. Minor Domo. Serve Shipmaster, serve Prophets, serve Covenant." The grunt's voice carried exhaustion and fear in equal measure. "Humans are enemy. Prophets say humans must die, but bugs kill Ungoi same as humans. Don't care about Prophet's words." "Welcome to the club," Rico said dryly. "The bugs don't care about anyone's ideology. They just eat and breed." The moment of strange detente shattered as plasma fire screamed overhead. An elite in crimson armor landed nearby with gravitational assistance, his energy sword igniting as he surveyed the scene. His mandibles flared wide when he saw grunts and humans in proximity without combat. "Treachery." The elite's voice was thunder-given form. "You dare speak with the unclean? You shame your bloodline, Yayap." "But Commander..." The elite struck Yayap across the face with a backhand that sent the grunt sprawling. "Silence. We will discuss your heresy after..." The ground exploded beneath them. A hunter pair, massive armored aliens standing over 12 feet tall with integrated fuel rod cannons, emerged from a crater rim. But they weren't firing at humans. They were engaging something behind the elite, something that made even these walking tanks retreat, step by calculated step. A brute chieftain crashed into the combat zone, gravity hammer raised high. His armor was bloodied, his face twisted with savage fury. Behind him came a pack of lesser brutes, their eyes wild with bloodlust that had nothing to do with bugs or humans. "The prophets have shown me truth, Vadami," the chieftain roared. "Your Sangheili kind grows soft, speaking of honor while the great journey awaits. These worlds, these artifacts, Jiralhanae will claim them." The elite commander's mandibles tightened. "Tartarus sends his rabid dogs early. The schism is not yet..." "The schism is now!" Rico understood political coups. The Federation had 3 of them during the Bug War's early years. What he was witnessing was internal Covenant conflict erupting at the worst possible tactical moment. Exactly the kind of chaos a good sergeant could exploit. "Fall back to secondary positions," he ordered his squad. "Let them sort out their command structure issues. Watkins, get command on comms. Tell them the aliens are fighting each other now. We might not need to engage at all." But command had other plans. Drop ships screamed across the sky in tight formation, disgorging thousands of mobile infantry onto designated landing zones surrounding the Covenant position. It wasn't reinforcement. It was encirclement. Admiral Kowalski's orders had been explicit. Contain the alien force, wait for bug attrition to do its work, then move in for salvage operations. The elite commanders saw the trap closing. Bugs from below, brute betrayers within, and now human reinforcements in overwhelming numbers. His tactical options collapsed to a single path. Fight through the humans and establish an extraction point, or die on this cursed world. He made the only choice a warrior could. All forces, break through formation, target the human lines. For the prophets, for the journey. He paused, seeing Yayap still cowering near the humans who'd saved him. Seeing the brutes murder grunts who refused to join their rebellion. Seeing the bugs that cared nothing for faith or honor or anything except consumption. For survival. His energy sword cut through the air in a gesture that transcended species. It meant attack. Covenant forces surged forward in a disciplined spearhead, shields flaring as they absorbed the first volleys of human fire. Plasma and bullets filled the air. Bugs closed from 3 directions, mandibles clicking in hive mind coordination. Brutes howled their betrayal and swung gravity hammers that crushed grunt and human alike. And in orbit, the pious Inquisitor's weapons locked onto the surface concentrations, preparing to end the battle the way Covenant always did, with cleansing fire from above. Shipmaster Thel Vadami entered the final authorization code. Commence glassing operations. Target primary hive structure. The ventral plasma beam, capable of superheating planetary crust until it liquefied into glass, began its charge cycle. In 30 seconds, everything within a 10-kilometer radius would cease to exist. Bugs, brutes, humans, and his own ground forces. It was a commander's nightmare calculation, but one he'd been trained to make. Sometimes victory required sacrifice. The beam fired. The plasma beam descended like the wrath of an angry god. A column of superheated matter 3 meters wide that turned atmosphere to ionized vapor in its wake. Its target, the primary hive structure designated Objective Zebra, where thousands of arachnids were pouring from tunnel entrances in endless waves. Sergeant Rico saw it coming 2 seconds before impact. 2 seconds to recognize his death approaching at the speed of light. 2 seconds to think of Buenos Aires, of Carmen, of every trooper he'd watched die on a dozen worlds. 2 seconds to understand that the Federation's strategy of letting enemies kill each other had one fundamental flaw. Sometimes everyone died. Take cover! The beam struck the hive entrance dead center. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. Rock superheated to plasma. Bugs vaporized by the thousands, their chitin flash cooking before their nervous systems could register pain. The tunnel network became a kiln, heat propagating through underground passages and cooking everything inside for kilometers in every direction. The shockwave expanded outward in a perfect sphere of death. Covenant forces activated their energy shields. Golden, blue, and crimson barriers flaring to maximum power as the heat wave washed over them. Grunts huddled behind elites who stood firm, shields holding against temperatures that would liquefy steel. The shields flickered, wavered, but held. Mobile infantry had no such protection. Rico's squad threw themselves into a blast crater as the thermal pulse swept across their position. The air itself ignited. Troopers screamed as their armor superheated, cooking them inside their own gear. Private Watkins's last act was pushing Rico deeper into the crater, his body shielding his sergeant from the worst of the heat before he collapsed, smoke rising from his melted armor seams. When the initial blast passed, Rico dragged himself upright. His armor was scorched black, his skin blistered beneath, but he was alive. Around him, his squad was gone. 37 troopers reduced to 22 corpses and 15 walking wounded in the span of 5 seconds. The landscape had been transformed. Where the hive entrance had stood, there was now a crater of molten glass cooling into crystalline formations that reflected the burning sky. Thousands of bug corpses lay scattered across the killing field, most reduced to ash and bone fragments. The Covenant ground force had survived behind their shields, but their formation was scattered, many units separated from command structure. And the bugs. The bugs weren't finished. New tunnels burst open beyond the glassed zone. More Arachnids poured forth, these ones emerging from secondary hive structures that the Covenant's orbital strike hadn't reached. The hive mind adapted, learned, redirected its forces through alternative routes. It didn't mourn its losses because it couldn't. It simply spawned more warriors to replace them. Rico checked his Merida rifle. Barrel warped from heat, but still functional. He keyed his comm, surprised to find it working. "Command, this is Rico. My position is hell on Earth. Request immediate extract." "Negative, Sergeant." Admiral Kowalski's voice came through with crystal clarity. "All forces are to engage the alien ground troops while they're disorganized. This is our best opportunity to capture their technology." Rico stared at the comm in disbelief. "Sir, we just survived an orbital bombardment that killed thousands of our own troops. The aliens are still combat effective, and the bugs are regrouping. What you need, Sergeant, is to follow orders. Engage the enemy. Kowalski out." The line went dead. Rico looked at his surviving squad. Burned, terrified, but still standing. They'd survived Klendathu. They'd survived bug tunnels on 7 different worlds. They'd survived an orbital strike that should have killed everyone. And now Command wanted them to assault warriors who tanked that same strike behind energy shields. "Sarge?" one of the survivors asked, voice hollow. "What do we do?" Johnny Rico had learned a long time ago that the Federation's command structure often asked the impossible. He'd also learned that good sergeants found ways to make the impossible survivable. "We do our job," he said, chambering a fresh magazine. "But we do it smart. Stay low, move fast, and aim for the small ones, those grunts. Their shields look weaker, and if you get a shot at their equipment, take it. Command wants tech. We'll get them tech." Across the battlefield, Elite Commander Zuka Zamami assessed his tactical situation with growing anger. The glassing beam had eliminated the immediate bug threat, but scattered his forces and exposed his position to human encirclement. Worse, the brute rebellion had cost him 40 warriors. Elites murdered by their supposed allies during the chaos of the orbital strike. Now the humans advanced from multiple vectors, thousands of them, willing to throw bodies at any problem until it drowned in blood. It was a tactic he found both repulsive and disturbingly effective. "Reform defensive perimeter," he ordered through comm channels. "Hunters to forward positions, all Sangheili, shields to maximum. Show these humans what true warriors can accomplish." A lance of elites responded immediately, their shields flaring to full power as they advanced to meet the human wave. Plasma rifles barked in disciplined volleys, each shot finding targets with veteran precision. Human soldiers fell by the dozens, their primitive armor offering no protection against weapons that operated at plasma state temperatures. But the humans kept coming. For every 10 that fell, 20 more took their place. They advanced in standard Federation doctrine: overwhelming firepower, acceptable casualties, relentless pressure. Merida rifles chattered in sustained bursts, thousands of rounds pouring into the Covenant position. Individual shots were ineffective against shields, but concentrated fire from dozens of rifles could drain shield capacity through sheer volume. An elite's shield flickered under sustained fire, golden light wavering. And in that moment of vulnerability, 50 bullets found their mark. The warrior staggered, His shields collapsed, and a second volley tore through his armor. He fell, mandibles spread in a death cry that spoke of honor lost to numerical superiority. Zuko watched the warrior fall and felt something shift in his understanding. These humans fought without honor, without skill, without grace. But they fought with a mathematical ruthlessness that transcended such concerns. They had turned warfare into arithmetic. If they could kill one elite for every 100 humans lost, and they had millions of humans available, then the equation favored them. It was the same calculation that had allowed the Covenant to glass dozens of human worlds. Now it was being used against him. All units, tactical withdrawal. Move to secondary LZ. Call for immediate extraction. He hated the words, even as he spoke them. Elites did not retreat. But elites also did not die for nothing on worlds that held no strategic value. The retreat began under covering fire from hunter pairs, their fuel rod cannons creating explosive barriers that slowed the human advance. But it was during the withdrawal that the true chaos erupted. Yayap, the grunt who had been saved by Rico's squad, found himself caught between two advancing forces. Behind him, elites retreated in disciplined formation, plasma fire covering their withdrawal. Ahead, human soldiers advanced with mechanical determination, their weapons spitting death. And around him, grunts fled in panic, their Sangheili commanders having abandoned them to their fate in the rush to secure extraction. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 hours earlier. "Humans," he shrieked in his broken English, holding his plasma pistol above his head in what he hoped was a universal gesture of surrender. "Yayap, surrender, not shoot!" Rico saw the small alien waving his weapon overhead and recognized him, the grunt from earlier, the one he'd saved from the bugs. For a moment, his finger tensed on the trigger. Orders were orders, and command wanted tech, not prisoners. But something in the grunt's desperate eyes reminded him of young troopers on their first drop. Terrified, abandoned, looking for any path to survival. "Hold fire," Rico ordered his squad. "Secure the alien. Move." 2 troopers rushed forward, yanking the plasma pistol from Yayap's hands and zip-tying his wrists. The grunt chittered nervously, but didn't resist. Rico keyed his comm. "Command, Rico here. We've secured an enemy combatant. Intact armor, intact weapon, and he speaks English. Requesting priority extract for intelligence purposes." This time, Admiral Kowalski's response was immediate and approving. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. Extract team en route to your position. Secure the prisoner and any additional technology you can gather. The Federation will want to debrief this one personally." As a dropship descended through the smoke-choked sky, Rico looked at Yayap, at the small alien soldier who'd been betrayed by his commanders, abandoned during retreat, and saved by the enemy twice in one day. "Looks like you picked the right side," Rico said. Yayap's triangular mask shifted in what might have been a bitter laugh. "Ungoi have no side. Ungoi have survival. Prophets say great journey. Sangheili say honor. Brutes say power. Humans say..." He tilted his head, genuinely curious. What humans say? Rico thought of Buenos Aires, reduced to radioactive ash, of Klendathu's meat grinder, of Watkins' body cooling in the crater behind them, of a federation that measured victory in acceptable casualties and territorial gains. Humans say, win, whatever it costs. The dropship's ramp lowered, and troopers hustled Yayap aboard. As they lifted off, Rico watched the battle continue below, Covenant forces reaching their extraction point under sustained human fire, bugs emerging from new tunnels to attack both sides with mindless hunger, and somewhere in orbit, fleets preparing for the next engagement. In the Pious Inquisitor's bridge, Shipmaster Thel Vadame received reports with mounting concern. 40% casualties among ground forces. 3 Phantoms shot down during extraction. 1 elite commander confirmed dead from human small arms fire. Death by 1,000 cuts from primitive weapons. And now reports of Ungoi desertion, with at least 1 captured by human forces. Worse, Fleet Master Voro Mantakri was demanding explanations for the engagement. The prophets would hear of this failure. The political consequences could be severe. But Thel had fought in 100 campaigns. He knew when to press an attack and when to withdraw and reassess. These humans were different from the colony defenders his fleets usually encountered. They had infrastructure, numbers, and a willingness to die that suggested fanaticism rivaling the Covenant's own. And the Arachnids, the bugs, represented a variable his tactical models couldn't account for. They operated on biological imperatives that transcended strategy, and their numbers seemed limitless. "Prepare for slipspace transition," he ordered. "But maintain surveillance satellites in orbit. We will return with reinforcements sufficient to cleanse this world properly. The prophets will have their victory." As the Covenant fleet began its withdrawal jump, Admiral Kowalski watched them go with grim satisfaction. He'd lost 11 capital ships and 70,000 troops. By most standards, it was a catastrophic defeat. By Federation standards, it was acceptable. He'd secured alien technology, a live prisoner for intelligence, and proven that the new enemy, whatever they called themselves, could bleed. More importantly, he'd bought time for the Federation to analyze, adapt, and mobilize the industrial might that had sustained them through 5 years of bug war. The aliens would return. They always did. But next time, humanity would be ready. The TFS Roger Young limped back to the fortress world of Sanctuary, its hull scarred with plasma scoring and radiation burns that would require months of dock time to repair. In a shielded interrogation cell deep within the ship's intelligence section, Yayap sat on a bench scaled for human proportions, his short legs dangling above the floor like a child's. His methane mask had been replaced with a Federation-issued breather unit, less comfortable but functional. 2 armed guards stood at the door while a third figure entered. A woman in military intelligence gray, her face professionally neutral. "I'm Lieutenant Marquez," she said, sitting across from him with a datapad. "You understand that, as an enemy combatant, you have no rights under Federation law. However, cooperation will be taken into consideration when determining your status." Yayap's triangular mask tilted. "Yayap, understand. Humans want information. Yayap want not death. Is trade, yes?" Marquez allowed herself a slight smile. "Yes, it's a trade. Let's start simple. What is your species called?" "Ungoi. Humans say grunt. His insult name Sangheili use." Yayap's voice carried bitter resentment. "In Covenant, Ungoi are lowest. Do all hard work, get least food, die first in battle. Sangheili are warriors, very proud, very honor. Kigyar are jackals, sneaky, want money. Jiralhanae are brutes, very strong, very stupid, very angry. Lekgolo are hunters, 2 worms in 1 armor, very scary. And prophets." He paused, his voice dropping. "Prophets say what everyone do. Prophets say great journey. Prophets say kill all humans." "Why?" Marquez leaned forward. "Why do your prophets want humanity dead?" "Yayap not know. Is religious thing. Prophets say humans are heretics. Humans break sacred law just by existing. So must all die." He looked at her with surprisingly intelligent eyes. "But Yayap think prophets maybe lie. Many things prophets say not make sense. Say Ungoi go on great journey if die in battle. But many Ungoi die, no journey happen, just death." Marquez made notes on her datapad. Military intelligence would parse every word for actionable data, but she recognized something valuable: doubt. This grunt doubted his leader's religious doctrine. That was a wedge that could be exploited. Tell me about your weapons. How do the plasma weapons work? Yayap brightened. Here was something he understood. Plasma pistol take gas, use magnetic bottle, make very hot. Pull trigger, shoot hot plasma ball. Hit target, target get burned very bad. Is simple weapon, even Ungoi can use. He gestured at his confiscated pistol, now sitting on the examination table. But energy sword, plasma rifle, those are Sangheili weapons. Only warriors allowed? Ungoi touch warrior weapon, Sangheili beat Ungoi. And the shields? Personal energy shield, very expensive. Only Sangheili and high rank get shields. Work by... Yayap not understand science words. Make bubble of energy around body. Bullets hit bubble, bubble absorb energy. Too many bullets, bubble fail. Then warrior die like everyone else. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Yayap tells secret. Shields not work good against plasma. Covenant weapon against Covenant shield, shield fail fast. Is why Jiralhanae rebellion very bad. Brutes have plasma weapons, kills Sangheili easy if surprise them. Marquez's mind raced. Internal rebellion. Weapons effective against their own shields, religious doubt among lower ranks. These were fractures that could be widened. The Federation had turned entire nations against each other during the pre-space colonial wars. This covenant could be vulnerable to the same tactics. This Jiralhanae rebellion you mentioned, is it widespread? Yayap's mask bobbed in what might have been a nod. Is starting. Yayap hear things on ship. Prophets favor brutes now, give them important jobs. Sangheili very angry, say brutes are animals with no honor. Brutes say Sangheili are weak, too worried about honor to do what necessary. Soon, Yayap think, big fight happen, maybe even civil war. And where would the Ungoi stand in this civil war? The grunt's laugh was bitter and wheezing. Ungoi stand nowhere. Ungoi die. Sangheili use Ungoi as shields. Brutes use Ungoi as food. Prophets use Ungoi as workers. Everyone use Ungoi, nobody protect Ungoi. Is why Yayap surrender. Better live as human prisoner than die for Covenant that not care if Yayap live or die. Marquez filed the recording and stood. You've been very helpful, Yayap. We'll continue this conversation later. In the meantime, you'll be held in secure but comfortable conditions. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. After she left, Yayap sat alone in the cell, processing his situation. He'd betrayed the Covenant, violated every oath he'd taken during conscription. By Covenant law, he was heretic marked, his bloodline shamed for generations. His family on the Ungoi homeworld would be punished for his desertion. But he was alive, and in 5 years serving the Covenant, he'd watched hundreds of Ungoi die for religious promises that never materialized. Maybe the humans would kill him eventually. Maybe they'd dissect him for science. But maybe, just maybe, they'd offer him something the Covenant never had. A future that wasn't measured in acceptable casualties. 3 star systems away, High Charity, the Covenant's mobile, holy city and capital, drifted through space like a massive mushroom-shaped monument to theocratic power. In the council chambers deep within its core, 3 Prophet Hierarchs sat in anti-gravity thrones, their ancient bodies sustained by technology that bordered on the miraculous. The Prophet of Truth reviewed Shipmaster Thel Vadami's report with calculation hidden behind his ceremonial mask. The Prophet of Regret seethed with poorly concealed anger. The Prophet of Mercy, oldest and most traditional, spoke first. The humans resist with greater force than anticipated. And these Arachnids, they were not mentioned in any Forerunner records. An oversight in our intelligence. Not an oversight. Truth corrected smoothly. An anomaly. The Forerunners documented thousands of species. But these creatures appear to have evolved after the halo activation. They are not blessed with the Forerunner's grace. They are merely animals. Dangerous animals, but animals nonetheless. Regret's throne rotated to face truth. Dangerous animals that destroyed 40% of a reconnaissance fleet and forced Shipmaster Vadami to withdraw. The Sangheili grow careless in their pursuit of honor. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our reliance on them as warriors. Truth recognized the political maneuvering. Regret had been cultivating relationships with Jiralhanae chieftains for years, preparing for the day when the prophets might need an alternative to Sangheili military dominance. That day was approaching faster than even Truth had anticipated. The Sangheili have served faithfully for millennia, Mercy said, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. To replace them now would violate sacred convention. Sacred convention written when we first formed the covenant, Truth replied. But conventions serve the great journey, not the reverse. If the Jiralhanae can better serve our holy purpose, then we must consider all options. He turned to his aides. Send orders to Fleet Master Voro Manticree. Assemble a proper battle fleet, 10 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and the assault carrier Solemn Penance. These humans and their insect infestation will be cleansed properly, and assign Jiralhanae chieftains as observers. Let them demonstrate their combat prowess alongside the Sangheili. Regret's expression, hidden behind his mask but visible in his body language, showed satisfaction. Truth was accelerating the timeline for Sangheili replacement. The civil war that would reshape the Covenant was being engineered piece by piece, and this human-bug conflict provided the perfect catalyst. On Sanctuary, Admiral Kowalski stood in Fleet Command Situation Room, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time intelligence. The captured grunt's interrogation had been transcribed, analyzed, and distributed to every senior officer in the Federation military. The implications were staggering. So, let me understand this correctly, said General Owen, commander of Mobile Infantry Forces. These Covenant bastards are having their own internal power struggle. The warrior caste is losing political favor to a more brutal faction, and their entire civilization is based on a religious quest that even their own lowest-ranking troops doubt. That's the assessment, yes, Kowalski confirmed. Military intelligence believes we can exploit these fractures. Psychological warfare, propaganda broadcasts, targeted information operations. Won't mean shit if they glass our colonies from orbit. Owen interrupted. Admiral, I appreciate intelligence gold as much as the next officer, but we need practical solutions. How do we fight shields we can't penetrate and plasma weapons that melt our ships? Kowalski pulled up a new display. Footage from the P-7743 engagement, showing Covenant shields failing under concentrated fire. We fight them the way we fight the bugs, with overwhelming volume. Look here. It took approximately 4,000 rounds of sustained fire to collapse an elite's personal shield. Once collapsed, they're vulnerable to standard ammunition for 6 to 8 seconds before recharge. If we can coordinate fire discipline, we can create kill zones. 4,000 rounds per target, Owen said flatly. Do you understand how much ammunition that requires? I do. I've already requisitioned increased production from the orbital factories. We're also developing specialized anti-shield rounds, high-velocity depleted uranium penetrators that carry more kinetic energy. Field tests suggest they can reduce the rounds-to-kill threshold by 30%. And the plasma weapons? We're reverse engineering the captured grunt's pistol now. Initial analysis suggests the magnetic containment technology is actually relatively simple. We've had similar concepts in experimental labs for years. We just never weaponized them because conventional firearms were sufficient against bugs. That calculation has changed. A junior officer entered the situation room and saluted. Sirs, We have movement. Surveillance satellites at P7743 are detecting multiple slip-space ruptures. Covenant fleet strength, estimated 30-plus capital ships. They're not scouting anymore. This is an invasion force. Kowalski felt ice settle in his gut. 30 capital ships with shield technology and plasma weapons could glass a dozen worlds before the Federation could mount an effective defense. P7743 was expendable, a bug-infested rock with minimal strategic value. But if the Covenant was committing this level of force to a single target, it meant they were making a statement. Humanity would be crushed through overwhelming power. How long until they reach P43? 18 hours, sir. Owen turned to Kowalski. We need to evacuate every Federation citizen within 20 light years. If they're establishing a foothold, we have to assume they'll expand from there. Agreed. But we're also sending the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets to P7743. Kowalski's voice was steel. If they want that rock, they'll pay for it in blood. And every minute they spend fighting us is a minute they're not glassing core worlds. We fight a delaying action, make them bleed for every inch of space. You're talking about sacrificing 3 fleets, nearly 200 ships. I'm talking about buying time for the Federation to mobilize its full industrial capacity. We've fought the bugs for 5 years. We've learned how to take casualties and keep fighting. These Covenant think they'll terrify us with their technology. Kowalski's scarred face set in grim determination. They're about to learn what total war really means. On P7743's surface, in the cooled glass crater where the primary hive had stood, something stirred beneath the crystalline surface. The Covenant's orbital strike had killed millions of Arachnids, but it hadn't reached the deep tunnels. The breeding chambers kilometers below the surface where the hive's true strength resided. A brain bug, its bulbous head pulsing with bioelectric thought, processed the recent battle through the hive mind network. New variables had entered the equation. Warriors with energy shields that conventional warrior bugs couldn't penetrate. Weapons that killed with heat rather than kinetic force. Ships that could burn the surface from orbit. The hive mind adapted. Deep in the breeding chambers, genetic sequences shifted. New warrior variants began gestation. Heavier chitin plating, heat-resistant organic compounds, specialized attack forms designed specifically to counter energy shields. The bugs couldn't build technology, but they could evolve in real time. Each generation incorporating lessons learned from the previous one's death. The Covenant was returning with greater force. The humans were sending more fleets, and the Arachnids were breeding new horrors designed to kill them both. P7743 was about to become the crucible, where 3 species would test their capacity for warfare, sacrifice, and survival. Only one equation mattered now. Which civilization could accept the most losses and still continue fighting? The answer would be written in the ruins of a dead world. The Covenant Armada dropped from slipspace in a formation that spoke of overwhelming confidence. 32 capital ships arranged in a battle sphere, their hulls gleaming with sacred geometry and pulsing energy cores. At the center hung the assault carrier Solemn Penance. 3 kilometers of reinforced nanolaminate armor and enough firepower to level a continent. On its bridge, Fleet Master Voro Manticree surveyed the tactical displays with satisfaction. The humans have deployed 3 of their battle groups, his operations officer reported. 173 vessels total. They form a defensive screen around the planet. Voro's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. 173 primitive ships against the Prophet's chosen fleet. They demonstrate courage, at least. It will make their destruction more satisfying. He activated fleet-wide communications. All ships, weapons free. Target their capital vessels first. let their smaller craft witness the futility of resistance before we destroy them as well. But before the Covenant could fire, a new signal appeared on their sensors, one that made even veteran shipmasters pause. Fleetmaster, detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Analysis suggests biological plasma artillery, hundreds of launch points activating simultaneously. Voro understood immediately. The Arachnids had learned from their first engagement. They weren't simply defending their world. They were turning it into a fortress bristling with organic weapons platforms. The tactical implications were clear. Any ship that entered low orbit would face sustained bombardment from creatures that could spit plasma with enough force to damage shielded vessels. All ships, maintain high orbit. Prepare glassing. The human fleet opened fire. It wasn't the scattered, desperate volleys of their previous encounter. This was coordinated, calculated firepower representing the Federation's adaptation to Covenant capabilities. 173 ships concentrated their fire on a single target. The destroyer, Adherent Flame. Nuclear warheads, railgun slugs traveling at relativistic speeds, and experimental plasma-tipped missiles converged on the vessel from multiple vectors simultaneously. The destroyer's shields flared brilliant blue, absorbing the initial barrage. Engineering crews rerouted power, compensating for the unexpected volume of incoming fire. The shields held for 4 seconds, then 5. Then, the shields collapsed. What happened next was brutal and methodical. With the shields down, conventional weapons found their mark. Nuclear warheads detonated against bare hull, creating expanding spheres of radioactive fire. Railgun penetrators punched through armor plating designed to withstand plasma, but vulnerable to kinetic strikes. The Adherent Flame broke apart in a cascading series of explosions, its reactor core breaching and sending debris spiraling into P-7743's atmosphere. Admiral Kowalski watched from the bridge of the TFS Ticonderoga, his expression grim but satisfied. First kill confirmed. All fleets rotate targeting to vessel designate Covenant 7. Maintain firing pattern Alpha 3. We make them pay for every meter of space. Admiral, we're tracking massive casualties across the fleet, his tactical officer reported. Covenant return fire is devastating. We've lost 9 capital ships in the opening exchange. Casualty projections? I don't care about projections, Kowalski interrupted. I care about results. We've proven their shields can fail. Now we prove they can die. Continue firing. The battle transformed into a grinding exchange of attrition that favored neither side. The Covenant possessed superior technology. Each plasma torpedo that connected vaporized a Federation vessel in seconds. But the Federation had superior numbers and industrial capacity. For every Covenant ship destroyed, they lost 5 of their own. By conventional military mathematics, this was an unacceptable exchange rate. By Federation doctrine, it was precisely on target. Fleetmaster Voro watched his tactical board with growing unease. 7 Covenant vessels destroyed or critically damaged in the first 30 minutes of engagement. The humans fought like Magalek Golo, the colony organisms that formed hunters, each ship a small part of a larger organism that could absorb catastrophic losses and continue functioning. They had no concept of honorable single combat, no appreciation for tactical elegance. They simply surrounded his fleet and hammered it with overwhelming firepower, accepting catastrophic losses to achieve results. Fleetmaster, the humans are deploying boarding craft. Hundreds of them. Small attack ships heading directly toward our formation. Voro's eyes widened in disbelief. They intend to board our vessels? With their primitive technology? Confirmed, sir. Analysis suggests they're treating our ships the same way they assault Arachnid positions. mass infantry boarding actions. It was audacious to the point of insanity. Federation boarding craft, converted drop ships with reinforced hulls and magnetic clamps, screamed toward the Covenant fleet under covering fire from their capital ships. Point defense plasma turrets destroyed hundreds, but hundreds more survived through sheer numerical superiority. They latched onto Covenant hulls like parasites and began cutting through with industrial plasma torches. On the cruiser Purity of Faith, alarms blared as human boarders breached the secondary hangar bay. The first wave died instantly, walking into a prepared kill zone where Covenant security forces cut them down with plasma fire. But the second wave came through behind portable shield generators hastily reverse-engineered from captured grunt equipment. The third wave brought heavy weapons, man-portable nuclear devices set on dead-man triggers. The message was clear. If they couldn't take the ship, they'd destroy it from within and consider the trade acceptable. Sangheili warriors met them in the corridors, energy swords igniting in ceremonial challenge. But human soldiers didn't fight with ceremony. They fought with grenades, flamethrowers, and weapons that violated every concept of honorable warfare. A lance of elites charged a human position, shields deflecting rifle fire, only to have the humans detonate the corridor's atmosphere with incendiary charges that turned the passageway into a kiln. Shields protected against kinetic and plasma weapons, but not against being cooked alive in superheated air. Repel boarders. Vadami's voice came over fleet channels. He'd been assigned to the Purity of Faith as tactical advisor, and now found himself in direct combat with enemies who seemed to have learned nothing from their previous defeat, or learned everything. All warriors to defensive positions. These humans fight without honor, so we grant them death without mercy. But the humans kept coming. For every squad cut down by plasma fire, 2 more breached different sections. They mapped the ship's layout through trial and error, sacrificing hundreds of lives to learn where critical systems were located. It was warfare as practiced by insects. Individual losses meaningless. Only the objective mattered. On the planet's surface, the Arachnids had been waiting for this moment. The Covenant fleet's arrival had drawn both human and alien forces into high orbit, leaving the surface temporarily abandoned. Brain bugs coordinated a planetary emergence. Millions of warrior bugs erupting from tunnels across every continent simultaneously, transforming P-7743 into a living weapon. Tanker bugs, positioned in carefully calculated formations, began their bombardment. Plasma arced into the sky in mathematically precise trajectories, targeting ships locked in combat who couldn't maneuver without breaking engagement. A Covenant destroyer, shields depleted from human fire, took 3 direct hits from bug plasma and broke apart. A Federation cruiser attempting evasive maneuvers found itself in the firing solution of 50 tanker bugs simultaneously. It lasted 6 seconds before vaporizing. The 3-way battle had become a 3-dimensional nightmare where no faction could disengage without exposing themselves to the other 2. The Covenant couldn't withdraw without the humans pursuing. The humans couldn't retreat without the Covenant glassing their escape routes. And neither could ignore the bugs turning the entire planet into an artillery battery. In the Solemn Penance's command center, Fleet Master Voro made the calculation he'd been trained to avoid: tactical withdrawal. The mission was cleansing this world of human infection. But losing half his fleet to achieve it would be strategically catastrophic. The prophets would demand explanations. Political rivals would use this failure to undermine his position. But warriors didn't achieve fleet command through cowardice. They achieved it through results, even ugly ones. All ships, prepare Nova bomb deployment. Target planetary core. His subordinates exchanged shocked glances. Nova bombs were world killers, Weapons used only when a planet held artifacts too dangerous to leave intact or infestation too widespread to cleanse conventionally. Using one here would eliminate all three factions, Covenant ground forces included, and leave the planet a lifeless cinder. Fleet Master, his second-in-command, ventured carefully. We have 40 warriors still aboard human vessels. The boarding party's on purity of faith alone. We'll die with honor, knowing their sacrifice served the great journey. Voro's voice was steel-wrapped in religious conviction. Prepare the weapon. We will show these humans and their insect allies what power the Covenant truly wields. Aboard the Ticonderoga, a Federation intelligence officer monitoring Covenant communications went pale. Admiral, we're detecting weapons activation on their lead carrier. Energy signature is, Sir. Our databases suggest it's a planet killer class weapon. Kowalski's mind raced through options, each worse than the last. They couldn't destroy the carrier before it fired. Its shields were still at 70% capacity. They couldn't evacuate their boarding parties in time. They couldn't even warn the 10,000 troops they had on various Covenant vessels that they were about to be sacrificed. He made the only call a Federation commander could. All ships, full reverse. Maximum burn away from planetary orbit. Abandon boarding operations. Send the recall signal, but don't wait for acknowledgement. His voice carried the weight of command decisions that haunted officers for the rest of their lives. We save who we can and learn from who we lose. The Federation fleet began its withdrawal, engines burning at maximum as they fought to achieve escape velocity before the Nova bomb deployed. Behind them, on 23 different Covenant vessels, human boarding parties received the recall order and understood exactly what it meant. Some tried to fight their way to hangar bays for extraction. Most simply armed their deadman nuclear devices and charged deeper into the ships, determined to take as many enemies with them as possible. In the corridors of the purity of faith, Shipmaster Thel Vadami watched human soldiers, knowing they were abandoned, knowing death was inevitable, continue attacking with mechanical precision. It was the most terrifying display of tactical discipline he'd ever witnessed. Warriors, he said to his security forces, these humans face death with courage equal to our own. Grant them the respect of clean kills. No torture, no mockery. They have earned honorable ends. The Nova bomb armed itself deep within the solemn penance's weapons bay. It was a marvel of Forerunner-inspired technology, a contained fusion reaction that would burrow to a planet's core before detonating, cracking the world like an egg and leaving nothing but an asteroid field in its wake. But before Fleet Master Voro could give the final authorization code, something impossible happened. Every ship in the Covenant fleet, all 32 vessels simultaneously, experienced catastrophic systems failure. Weapons offline. Shields collapsed. Life support stuttering. Communication networks dead. In the solemn penance's engineering bay, a brain bug that had been secretly transported aboard by tanker bugs plasma bombing the hull breach from below pulsed with bioelectric satisfaction. It had spent the entire battle infiltrating the ship's systems, its telepathic abilities allowing it to interface with the Covenant's neural networks. Now it broadcast a single command through those hijacked systems: shutdown. The Arachnids had learned a third lesson. Technology could be turned against those who relied on it. The hive mind didn't understand ships and computers, but brain bugs could manipulate electrical systems with their thoughts. They'd spent the battle learning the Covenant system's architecture through psychic observation, and now they'd found the kill switch. Admiral Kowalski watched 32 Covenant warships go dark simultaneously and understood he was witnessing something unprecedented. What the hell just happened? Unknown, sir. All Covenant vessels reporting systems failure. They're dead in space. Vulnerable. For 10 seconds, Kowalski stared at the tactical display. 3 fleets worth of Federation ships against 32 disabled Covenant vessels. It was target practice, a massacre waiting to happen. Every tactical bone in his body screamed to open fire, to eliminate the threat while they were helpless. But something stayed his hand. "Hold fire," he ordered quietly. "All ships, hold fire." "Sir?" "Those ships have thousands of crew aboard, soldiers who can't fight back. If we destroy them now, we're not warriors. We're executioners." He took a breath, knowing this decision might cost him his command. "Hail them. Offer terms." The universe held its breath as humanity extended mercy to an enemy who had shown them none. The silence across fleet channels was deafening. Federation officers stared at Admiral Kowalski as if he'd grown a second head. General Owen's voice crackled over priority comms, barely controlled fury in every syllable. "Admiral, clarify your last order. Did you just tell our forces to stand down against an enemy that was preparing to destroy an entire planet?" "That's correct, General." Kowalski kept his voice level, professional. "The enemy is disabled and defenseless. Destroying them now would violate every principle of military conduct and turn us into the same monsters we're fighting. They were about to commit planetary genocide. They've glassed dozens of our colonies. And if we slaughter helpless crews because of what they might have done, we become no better than the bugs we've spent 5 years fighting." Kowalski's scarred face was set in stone. "I'm offering them terms. Surrender their vessels. Provide intelligence on Covenant operations, and they'll be treated as prisoners of war under Federation military code. It's the only decision I can make and still look at myself in the mirror. The Admiralty will hear about this." "I expect they will, sir." Kowalski cut the channel and turned to his communications officer. "Send the offer on all frequencies. I want every Covenant crew member to hear it." Aboard the Solemn Penance, Fleet Master Voro Manticree sat in darkness, emergency lighting casting his bridge in crimson shadows. His armor's integrated systems were offline. His weapons were dead. His shields were gone. Every Covenant technological advantage had been stripped away by an enemy he didn't understand. An enemy that apparently lived inside his ship's computer networks. And now the humans were offering mercy. "Communications are restored, Fleet Master," an officer reported. "Manual systems only. The humans are broadcasting on all channels." "Put it through." Admiral Kowalski's voice filled the bridge, translated into Sangheili by the universal translation protocols that still functioned on backup power. "Covenant vessels. This is Admiral Henrik Kowalski of the Terran Federation. Your fleet has been disabled by an unknown weapon. We believe the Arachnid intelligence species is responsible. You are defenseless against both our forces and the bug swarms that control this planet's surface. I am offering you one opportunity. Surrender your vessels. Provide full intelligence on Covenant military operations, and you will be treated as prisoners of war with all rights and protections under Federation law. You have 10 minutes to respond." Voro's mandibles flared in rage. "Surrender." The word was poison to Sangheili honor. Warriors did not surrender. They died with weapons in hand, their deaths glorifying the great journey. To accept these terms was to shame himself, his lineage, and every warrior under his command. But 32 ships carried 60,000 crew members. Sangheili, Ungoy, Kigyar, Magalit-Golo, all loyal servants of the Covenant who deserved better than execution while helpless. And if the humans had wanted to destroy them, they could have done so already. The fact that they offered terms suggested something unexpected. Human military honor existed, even if it operated on principles foreign to Covenant understanding. "Opinions," Voro said to his bridge crew. "Speak freely." Shipmaster Thel Vadami, bloodied from repelling boarders, but alive, stepped forward. "Fleetmaster, surrender is unthinkable, but so is allowing 60,000 warriors to die without purpose. If we reject these terms, the humans will destroy us. If we accept, we live to fight another day, perhaps even escape and return to high charity with intelligence on human capabilities. You suggest we feign surrender, use their mercy against them? I suggest we accept the reality of our tactical situation." Thel's voice carried the weight of hard experience. These humans fight without honor, but they also show mercy when they could show death. That makes them unpredictable, dangerous in ways beyond simple combat capability. We need time to understand them before the Covenant commits additional fleets to this campaign. Another officer spoke up, a younger Sangheili whose armor bore scorch marks from plasma fire. "The humans could have destroyed us. They chose not to. That is, not what the prophets taught us to expect from heretics." Voro understood the unspoken implication. The prophets had declared humans to be mindless animals unworthy of life, creatures whose very existence defiled the Forerunner's legacy. But these humans demonstrated tactical sophistication, coordinated fleet operations, and now, incomprehensibly, battlefield mercy. Each observation contradicted the religious doctrine that justified humanity's extermination. "Open a channel," Voro ordered. "But understand this. I accept these terms, not from cowardice, but from tactical necessity. We will honor this surrender as warriors honor all oaths, until circumstances change." The acknowledgement signal went out, and within minutes, Federation boarding parties, these ones carrying medical supplies and engineering equipment instead of weapons, began transferring to the disabled Covenant vessels. The operation was surreal. Human soldiers and Covenant warriors eyeing each other with mutual suspicion, while brain bugs were hunted through the ship's computer cores, their psychic influence severed by electromagnetic pulses. In the Pious Inquisitor's hangar bay, Lieutenant Marquez led a security team aboard to oversee the transfer of command. She found Shipmaster Thel Vadame waiting, energy sword deactivated but still clipped to his belt, a symbolic statement that he surrendered by choice, not by force. "Shipmaster," she said formally, "your vessel and crew are now under Federation jurisdiction. All weapons will be secured, all personnel will be processed, and you will be transported to secure facilities for debriefing." Thel's mandibles clicked in what might have been a bitter smile. "You speak with authority, human. Tell me, does your Federation always show mercy to enemies who were preparing to destroy entire worlds?" "No," Marquez answered honestly. "But we've spent 5 years fighting an enemy that shows no mercy, takes no prisoners, and cannot be reasoned with. When we encounter an enemy that can be reasoned with, we prefer negotiation to extermination. It's what separates us from the bugs." A philosophical position? I wonder if your superiors share it. Some do, some don't. That's democracy for you. Messy, argumentative, but functional. She gestured toward the docking umbilical where Federation personnel were waiting. "Come on. You've got a lot of questions to answer." On P-7743's surface, the Arachnid swarms had achieved their objective, driving both invasive species into conflict that weakened them both. The brain bugs coordinated a tactical withdrawal, pulling warrior bugs back into the deep tunnels while surface positions remained defended by expendable shock troops. The hive mind calculated coldly. The humans and Covenant would either destroy each other completely or establish uneasy coexistence. Either outcome favored Arachnid expansion. But the brain bugs had underestimated one critical factor: both species' capacity for adaptation. In the Federation's interrogation facilities, Yayap found himself joined by hundreds of other Ungoi who'd been aboard disabled ships. The grunts huddled together, confused and terrified, unsure whether they'd be killed, enslaved, or simply left to suffocate when their methane supplies ran out. Lieutenant Marquez walked among them, her datapad recording everything. We're establishing temporary housing in the tertiary cargo bays. Methane atmosphere will be maintained. Food, your standard rations, will be provided. Anyone requiring medical attention will receive it. You are prisoners of war, which means you have rights under Federation military code. One grunt, braver or more desperate than the others, squeaked out a question in broken English. Why humans not kill Ungoi? We are enemies. Prophets say humans are demons. Because, Marquez said simply, we're not demons. We're soldiers fighting for survival, same as you. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out a way to stop killing each other long enough to deal with the actual threat on this planet. She pulled up footage on her datapad. Bug swarms emerging from tunnels, coordinated by brain bug intelligence. Those things down there, they don't care about your religion, your honor, or your politics. They just want to eat everything in the galaxy. Humans learned that the hard way. Now you're learning it too. The grunt stared at the footage, his triangular mask tilting in what might have been understanding. Bugs are everyone's enemy? Everyone's enemy, Marquez confirmed. So maybe it's time we started acting like it. In High Charity, 300 light years away, the Prophet of Truth received Fleet Master Voro's surrender transmission with carefully concealed satisfaction. The defeat was unfortunate. Losing 32 ships would require explanations. But the political opportunity it presented was invaluable. The Sangheili have failed, he announced to the council, his voice carrying manufactured sorrow. Their pride, their obsession with honor, their inability to adapt to unexpected threats, all of these have cost us a fleet. Meanwhile, the Jiralhanae warriors we assigned as observers fought to the last breath, refusing surrender even when all seemed lost. The Prophet of Regret leaned forward eagerly. The Sangheili have commanded our fleets for 3,000 years. Perhaps it is time for reconsideration of their role. The Prophet of Mercy, oldest of the three, hesitated. To strip the Sangheili of fleet command would violate sacred covenant. The political instability. The great journey demands strength. Truth interrupted smoothly. If the Sangheili can no longer provide it, then we must look elsewhere. I propose a compromise. Assign Jiralhanae chieftains as co-commanders on all major operations. Let both races prove their worth. May the strongest serve the Prophet's will. It was political poison, wrapped in reasonable compromise. Joint command meant divided loyalty, competing authority, inevitable conflict. Truth was engineering the Covenant's civil war one careful decision at a time, and the defeat at P-7743 provided the perfect justification. The Council approved the measure. The Great Schism, the prophesied split that would tear the Covenant apart, moved one step closer to reality. Aboard the Ticonderoga, Admiral Kowalski reviewed the intelligence pouring in from captured Covenant personnel. Ship schematics, weapon specifications, shield technology, slip-space navigation protocols. It was an intelligence bonanza that would take months to fully analyze. But one piece of information caught his attention immediately. They were going to use a planet killer, he said to General Owen, who'd arrived via shuttle to oversee the prisoner processing. A weapon that would have destroyed P-7743, killed every bug, killed every Federation trooper still on the surface, and killed their own ground forces. They were willing to sacrifice thousands of their own troops to eliminate the threat. Owen studied the technical readout. Sounds familiar. How many times have we glassed bug worlds with our own people still on them? That's different. We evacuate who we can, but sometimes Sometimes acceptable casualties include everyone, Owen finished. Admiral, we're not so different from these aliens. They fight for religious doctrine. We fight for species survival. Both of us are willing to sacrifice millions to achieve our objectives. The only difference is, we call it pragmatism, and they call it faith. Kowalski wanted to argue, but the words died in his throat. 5 years of total war had hardened the Federation into something that would have horrified pre-bug war humanity. Conscription of teenagers, orbital bombardment of contested worlds, acceptable casualty rates that measured losses in percentages rather than names. The Covenant wasn't humanity's opposite. It was humanity's dark mirror, showing what civilizations became when survival overrode morality. So, what do we do? Kowalski asked quietly. We can't trust them. We can't release them. We can't execute them without becoming monsters. And we sure as hell can't keep fighting 3 separate wars simultaneously. Owen was silent for a long moment. Then, we do what we always do, Admiral. We adapt. We learn from this enemy. We exploit their weaknesses, and we find a way to survive. Maybe that means temporary alliance against the bugs. Maybe that means playing Covenant factions against each other. Maybe it means something we haven't thought of yet. He gestured at the viewport, where disabled Covenant ships hung in formation alongside Federation vessels. But this right here? This is unprecedented. We captured an entire fleet without destroying it. We have their technology, their soldiers, and their tactical doctrine. That's worth more than any battle victory. Unless they're feeding us disinformation. Then we verify everything. Trust, but verify. Oldest intelligence principle in the book. Owen turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Admiral, I think you made the right call. Mercy when you can afford it, ruthlessness when you can't. That's the balance that keeps us human. After Owen left, Kowalski stood alone in the observation deck, watching the combined fleet begin its slow transit toward Federation space. Human ships and Covenant vessels moving in formation, separated by mutual suspicion, but united by immediate circumstance. It was fragile, temporary, and built on foundations of pragmatism rather than trust. But it was something, a crack in the certainty of total war, a possibility that survival didn't require extermination. On P-7743, abandoned by both fleets, the Arachnids continued their expansion unchecked. Brain bugs coordinated construction of new biostructures, warrior bugs multiplied in subterranean breeding chambers, and tanker bugs prepared for the next wave of invaders. The planet had become a fortress, a living weapon waiting for the galaxy's civilizations to return. And they would return. The Covenant couldn't ignore such a strategic defeat. The Federation couldn't abandon intelligence-gathering operations. And the bugs would keep breeding, keep spreading, keep waiting for the next opportunity to expand their territory. P-7743 had transformed from a minor skirmish into something far more significant. Proof that the galaxy contained multiple apex predator species, each capable of threatening the other's existence. The question was no longer which faction would win. The question was whether any of them could afford to keep fighting each other while a third enemy consumed worlds in silence. The fortress world of Sanctuary had been transformed into the largest prisoner of war camp in Federation history. Covenant personnel, 60,000 strong, were housed in hastily constructed detention facilities that sprawled across 20 square kilometers of prefabricated structures. The Sangheili occupied one sector, their warrior pride making them difficult but manageable prisoners. The Ungoi filled 3 sectors, their smaller frames allowing higher density housing. Kigyar snipers and Mgalak Golo hunter pairs required specialized containment that taxed Federation engineering capabilities. In the command center overlooking the facilities, Admiral Kowalski met with Military Intelligence Director Catherine Wells, a woman whose reputation for ruthless efficiency made even hardened officers uncomfortable. "Your mercy is going to get us all killed," she said without preamble, pulling up casualty projections on the holographic display. "We've spent 5 years fighting the bugs with total commitment. Now you want to divert resources to housing, feeding, and guarding 60,000 enemy combatants who were trying to exterminate us 3 weeks ago." "I want to leverage the intelligence they provide," Kowalski corrected. "Every Covenant soldier we interrogate gives us tactical data. Every ship we examine advances our technology by decades. Director, we captured an entire fleet intact. Something no military strategist thought possible. That's worth the resource investment." Wells wasn't convinced. "And when the Covenant sends a rescue operation? When these prisoners stage coordinated breakouts? When the public finds out we're treating alien genociders with more consideration than we show our own casualties? Then we deal with those problems as they arise." Kowalski's voice carried the weight of command decisions that aged officers prematurely. "But right now, we have a unique opportunity. Captured Covenant personnel are showing cracks in their religious indoctrination. The Ungoi especially. They're starting to question why the prophets abandoned them. If we can exploit that doubt, we might fracture the Covenant from within." Psychological warfare. Wells considered the angle. "Turn their prisoners into propaganda assets. I can work with that." She pulled up personnel files. "We've identified several high-value targets for intensive interrogation. Shipmaster Thel Vadami appears to be their equivalent of a fleet admiral. Decorated veteran, commanded dozens of successful operations. If we can crack him, we crack their entire tactical doctrine. And if we can't? Then we have 60,000 hostages to negotiate with when the Covenant returns. Either way, Admiral, your mercy becomes leverage." 3 sectors away, in the Sangheili detention facility, Thel Vadami meditated in his cell. It was a Spartan space, 10 meters square, reinforced walls, constant surveillance. But it allowed him the solitude necessary for contemplation. His armor had been confiscated, his weapons secured, his honor seemingly stripped. Yet he felt oddly at peace. The humans confused him. Their federation was simultaneously brutal and merciful, pragmatic and idealistic, efficient and chaotic. They fought like animals when necessary, but showed unexpected restraint when victory was achieved. Their society was built on principles that seemed contradictory. Military service as the path to citizenship, yet democratic representation for those who earned it. Total war doctrine, yet prisoners of war protections. A door chimed, the human method of requesting entry rather than simply barging in. Another small courtesy that defied his expectations. "Enter," Thel said in carefully practiced English. Lieutenant Marquez stepped inside, carrying a datapad and 2 containers of what appeared to be food. "Shipmaster, I thought we might talk over a meal. Your dietary requirements have been loaded into our systems. This should be compatible with Sangheili physiology." Thel eyed the food suspiciously. "You fear poison from your enemy, yet bring food to mine? It's not poisoned. You can scan it if you'd like." She sat down across from him, opening her own container. "Besides, if we wanted you dead, there are more efficient methods than food poisoning." The brutal honesty made Thel's mandibles twitch in something approaching amusement. He opened the container, protein synthesized to match Covenant nutritional standards, bland but functional. "You are the interrogator who questioned the Ungoi defector." "Yayip, yes. He's been very helpful." Marquez pulled up her datapad. "He told us about the brewing conflict between Sangheili and Jiralhanae, about the Prophet's favoritism shifting, about lower caste species questioning the great journey. She looked up at him. Is he telling the truth or feeding us disinformation? He is Ungoi. They lack the discipline for sophisticated deception. Thel ate slowly, buying time to consider his words. What he describes is politically complex. The Covenant is built on religious unity, but we are still individuals with competing interests. The Jiralhanae grow ambitious. The prophets grow cautious of Sangheili independence. It is the nature of all governments. So there is internal tension. There is always internal tension. It does not mean the Covenant will fracture. But even as he spoke, Thel wondered if he believed his own words. The surrender at P7743 had demonstrated systemic weaknesses that religious faith couldn't overcome. And the humans had exploited those weaknesses with disturbing efficiency. Marquez leaned forward. Shipmaster, I'm going to be direct with you. The Federation is fighting a two-front war we can't win. The bugs breed faster than we can kill them. Your Covenant possesses technology we can't match. If both conflicts continue simultaneously, humanity will be extinct within a decade. That's not propaganda, that's mathematical certainty. Then humanity's extinction is inevitable. The prophets will not cease their holy crusade, and the Arachnids cannot be reasoned with. Maybe. But what if there was a third option? She pulled up tactical data from P7743. Those brain bugs disabled your entire fleet by infiltrating your systems. That's a threat to the Covenant that has nothing to do with humanity. The Arachnids are expanding in all directions. Eventually, they'll encounter Covenant space. When that happens, your prophets will face an enemy that doesn't care about religious doctrine or honor codes or anything except consumption. Thel studied the data with professional interest. The brain bug's psychic infiltration had been unprecedented, a threat vector the Covenant had never encountered. If these creatures could disable ships, they could disable orbital defense platforms, ground installations, even High Charity itself. It was a vulnerability that religious faith couldn't protect against. You propose an alliance, he said slowly. Humans and Covenant, united against the Arachnid threat. I propose pragmatism. My superiors propose nothing. I'm speaking hypothetically. Marquez set down her datapad. But hypothetically, if both our civilizations recognized a common threat, maybe we could stop trying to exterminate each other long enough to address it. Once the bugs are contained, we can go back to our regularly scheduled warfare. It was said with dark humor, but Thel heard the underlying sincerity. This human understood something crucial. Survival sometimes required cooperation with enemies. The Covenant itself had been formed through such cooperation. Multiple species united under the Prophet's religious banner, setting aside ancient conflicts for a greater purpose. But could the Prophets be convinced? Could the Hierarchs accept temporary alliance with the species they declared heretical? Could Sangheili warriors fight alongside humans without considering it ultimate dishonor? Your proposal is impossible, Thel said finally. The Prophets would never. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated. Marquez was on her feet instantly, her hand going to the sidearm at her hip. What the hell? The intercom crackled. All personnel, we have a breach in Sector 7. Covenant forces are attempting escape. Security teams respond immediately. But it wasn't escape. It was rescue. A Covenant stealth corvette, small, fast, equipped with active camouflage that had evaded Federation sensor nets, had penetrated Sanctuary's orbital defenses. It dropped Special Operations troops directly onto the detention facility via gravity lifts, and those troops moved with lethal precision. They were Special Operations Sangheili, clad in black armor and carrying energy swords that carved through Federation security forces like plasma through paper. Their mission parameters were explicit. Recover Fleet Master Voro, Manticree, and high-value command personnel. All other prisoners were expendable. It was a calculated extraction that prioritized intelligence security over warrior solidarity. In the Ungoi sector, Yayap heard the alarms and explosions and understood immediately. The Covenant had come for its officers, not for common soldiers, not for grunts who'd been abandoned during the battle, just for the high-ranking Sangheili whose knowledge was valuable. He'd spent 3 weeks in Federation custody, receiving regular meals, basic medical care, and respectful treatment. The humans had kept their promises. Now his own people were attacking, and he knew with certainty that if the rescue team encountered him, they'd kill him as a traitor rather than rescue him as a comrade. "Humans!" he shrieked in his broken English, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Covenant Special Forces attacking. They come for officers. We'll kill everyone else. Must stop them." Other Ungoi picked up the alarm, their high-pitched voices creating a cacophony that overwhelmed the facility's communication systems. But several didn't run for cover. They ran toward the armory where their confiscated weapons were stored, not to escape, but to arm the human guards who treated them with unexpected decency. In Sector 1, the Special Operations Team breached Fleet Master Voro's containment cell with surgical precision. "Fleet Master, we are extracting you. The Prophets demand your immediate return to High Charity for debriefing." Voro stood slowly, his dignity intact despite weeks of captivity. "And the other warriors? The 60,000 loyal Covenant soldiers imprisoned here? Beyond our extraction capacity. Orders are explicit. Command personnel only." It was the answer Voro had expected but hoped to avoid. The Prophets were cutting losses, preserving valuable intelligence while sacrificing common troops. It was tactically sound and morally reprehensible. Exactly the kind of decision that made him question the religious hierarchy he'd sworn to serve. "I refuse extraction," he said quietly. The Special Operations leader's helmet couldn't hide his shock. "Fleet Master, the Prophets abandoned 60,000 warriors to enemy captivity. I will not compound that betrayal by escaping while they remain." Voro's voice carried absolute conviction. "Either you extract all Covenant personnel, or you leave me here. Choose." The standoff lasted 3 seconds. Then Federation security forces arrived in overwhelming numbers, their weapons trained on the Special Operations Team. The Covenant warriors could have fought, probably killed dozens before being overwhelmed. But their mission was extraction, not martyrdom. "Withdraw," the team leader ordered. "Mission parameters cannot be fulfilled." They vanished into the facility's chaos, their active camouflage making pursuit nearly impossible. The stealth corvette picked them up 15 minutes later and jumped to slip space before Federation interceptors could engage. The rescue attempt had failed, but it had revealed something far more valuable than freed prisoners. It had shown every Covenant soldier in Federation custody that their Prophets considered them expendable. In the aftermath, Lieutenant Marquez found Thel in his cell, the shipmaster sitting calmly, as if the violence hadn't touched him. "You didn't try to escape," she observed. "Where would I go? I have no ship, no fleet, no way to return to Covenant space, and..." He paused, mandibles working as he chose his words carefully. "And I am not certain I wish to return to masters who demonstrated such casual abandonment of loyal warriors. That Ungoi, Yayap, he warned us about the attack, helped arm our security forces. Several of his fellow grunts did the same. The Ungoi have always been underestimated. They are not warriors, but they are survivors. They recognize that your Federation, for all its flaws, treats its prisoners better than the Covenant treats its lowest castes. Thel looked at Marquez directly. Your hypothetical proposal, cooperation against the Arachnid threat, is becoming less hypothetical. The prophets have shown their true nature. Perhaps it is time warriors made their own decisions. Marquez felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't an intelligence breakthrough. This was a potential schism in enemy ranks that could reshape the entire war. I need to take this to my superiors. If you're serious about this, I am serious about survival, Lieutenant. The great journey is a beautiful lie, but lies do not protect against threats that consume worlds. He stood, his full height impressive, even without armor. The Arachnids are the true enemy. I believe this now. The question is whether your Federation and my warriors can cooperate long enough to address that threat before we all become food for mindless insects. 24 hours later, Admiral Kowalski stood before the Federation Security Council via secure holographic link, presenting a proposal that would have been considered treason a month earlier. We have a unique opportunity, he said to the assembled counselors. Covenant forces in our custody are experiencing internal fractures. Their leadership abandoned them. Their religious certainty is cracking, and they recognize, as we do, that the Arachnid threat is existential. I'm proposing a joint task force. Federation and Covenant personnel working together to study bug biology, develop countermeasures, and potentially launch coordinated strikes against primary hive worlds. The council chamber erupted in argument. Half the counselors demanded immediate execution of all Covenant prisoners. A quarter wanted them shipped to labor camps. The remainder saw Kowalski's logic but feared the political consequences. The Sky Marshal, Supreme Military Commander of Federation forces, silenced them with a raised hand. Admiral, you're asking us to trust the enemy, to arm them, work alongside them, share intelligence with them. The moment this joint task force develops effective bug-killing technology, what stops them from turning it against us? Nothing, Kowalski admitted, except mutual self-interest. The bugs are expanding in all directions. They threaten both our civilizations. If we continue fighting each other, the Arachnids win by default. This isn't about trust, it's about survival mathematics. The Sky Marshal studied the tactical projections, running calculations that measured human lives against strategic advantage. Finally, you have authorization to proceed with a limited pilot program. 50 Covenant personnel maximum, all under heavy guard, all monitored constantly. If this backfires, Admiral, it ends your career and possibly your freedom. Understood? Understood, sir. The decision was made. Humanity and the Covenant would attempt cooperation, not from mutual respect, not from shared values, but from cold recognition that survival required temporary alliance against a threat neither could defeat alone. In his cell, Fleet Master Voro received news of the joint task force and allowed himself a rare expression of satisfaction. The prophets had abandoned him. But perhaps abandonment was the greatest gift they could have given. It freed him to make choices based on tactical reality rather than religious doctrine. The great journey was a lie. Survival was truth. And survival meant fighting alongside former enemies against the real threat consuming the galaxy. The Joint Task Force facility was built on Hesperus, a barren moon with minimal atmosphere and maximum security. Federation engineers had constructed a research complex that was equal parts laboratory and fortress. Reinforced bunkers, energy barriers, automated defense turrets, and enough firepower to sterilize the surface if the experiment went catastrophically wrong. 50 Covenant personnel had been selected. 30 Sangheili warriors with technical expertise. 15 Ungoi who demonstrated loyalty during the rescue attempt. and 5 Huragok engineers whose biological understanding of technology made them invaluable for reverse engineering bug biology. The human contingent numbered 200, scientists, soldiers, intelligence officers, and enough heavy weapons specialists to ensure that cooperation remained cooperative. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Federation's leading xenobiologist, stood in the central briefing hall addressing both species for the first time. Behind her, holographic displays showed dissected arachnid specimens, warrior bugs, tanker bugs, and most disturbingly, a brain bug whose bulbous cranium still pulsed with residual bioelectric activity despite being clinically dead. "Gentlemen," she began, then corrected herself. "Warriors and soldiers. We're here because both our civilizations face an enemy that operates on principles neither of us fully understand. The Arachnids aren't just animals. They're a hive-mind intelligence that adapts in real time. They've already demonstrated ability to counter Covenant energy shields and Federation kinetic weapons. If we don't develop effective countermeasures, both our species will be on their menu within a decade." Shipmaster Thel Vadami, standing at the front of the Covenant contingent, translated key points into Sangheili for those whose English was limited. His presence had been crucial to making this collaboration possible. Respected by his warriors, trusted, cautiously, by Federation command, and possessed of tactical pragmatism that transcended religious dogma. "Our initial research has focused on the brain bugs," Dr. Chen continued. "They appear to be the command nodes for arachnid swarms. Kill a brain bug and local warrior bugs lose coordination. They revert to basic attack patterns. The problem is brain bugs are heavily defended and can psychically sense threats before they arrive." One of the Sangheili scientists, a minor noble named Sesa Refumi, raised a hand in the human gesture he'd learned. "You say psychic sensing. Does this relate to their ability to infiltrate technological systems?" "We believe so. Brain bugs emit bioelectric fields that interact with electronic systems. That's how they disabled your fleet at P7743. Our working theory is they evolved this capability as a defense mechanism, possibly against another technological species they encountered during their expansion." The implications sent murmurs through both groups. If the bugs had encountered and adapted to other spacefaring species, it meant the arachnid threat was older and more widespread than anyone had realized. Yayap, standing among the Ungoi contingent, raised his methane-masked face. "If bugs learn from fighting, and bugs fight many species, then bugs know how to kill everyone." "Yes, that's our fear," Dr. Chen admitted. "Which is why we need to pool our knowledge. The Covenant has encountered species the Federation hasn't. The Federation has fought bugs for 5 years. Together, we might find patterns neither of us could see alone." A Federation colonel, Marcus Webb, commander of the facility's security forces, stepped forward. "Let's address the elephant in the room. 3 weeks ago, we were trying to kill each other. Some of you lost family to Covenant glassing. Some of you lost comrades to Federation nuclear weapons. I'm not asking anyone to forget that. I'm asking you to put it aside long enough to deal with a threat that makes our previous conflicts look like schoolyard disputes." Thel translated, then added his own words. "The Colonel speaks truth. Many here have grievances. I myself commanded operations that resulted in human casualties. But honor demands we recognize when a greater threat supersedes personal conflict. The Arachnids do not care about our honor, our faith, or our politics. They only care about consumption. If we cannot cooperate, we will be consumed. It is that simple." The first week was tense. Human and Covenant personnel worked in separate shifts, communicating through intermediaries, their mutual distrust palpable. But science had a way of transcending politics. When a Federation biologist discovered that arachnid chitin was vulnerable to specific plasma frequencies, Covenant engineers immediately began modifying weapon configurations. When a Sangheili chemist identified pheromone markers that brain bugs used for swarm coordination, Federation scientists developed synthetic disruptors. Progress bred familiarity. Familiarity bred grudging respect. In the weapons testing range, Sergeant Johnny Rico found himself standing next to an elite warrior named Entho Shraum, one of the few Sangheili who spoke fluent English and possessed a sense of humor that translated across species. "Your Merida rifle," Entho observed as Rico practiced with a new anti-chitin round. "It is crude but functional, like a club that throws metal very quickly." Rico grinned. "Your plasma rifle is fancy and effective, like a lightsaber that shoots, still doesn't make you a better shot." "Perhaps we test this theory?" Entho's mandibles spread in what Rico had learned to recognize as a smile. "Target competition. Your bullets against my plasma?" They spent the next hour in friendly competition, their shots gradually improving as they adjusted to new ammunition types designed specifically for bug warfare. Other soldiers, human and Covenant, began to gather, cheering for their respective champions. The competition became collaborative as they shared targeting techniques, stance adjustments, and tactical observations. "Your species uses both eyes for aiming," Entho noted. "Sangheili have 4 eyes, wider peripheral vision but less depth perception. We compensate with motion tracking." "That explains why you're so good at tracking fast-moving targets," Rico said. "We focus on precision at range, different evolution, different tactics, but similar results when facing swarms of chitinous monsters." Entho paused, his expression sobering. "I fought humans on 7 worlds, Rico. I killed many of your people. I believed it was righteous, that the Prophet's word was absolute truth. Now I learn the Prophets abandoned us at P7743. I do not know what I believe anymore." Rico understood that crisis of faith intimately. He'd watched the Federation sacrifice millions on Klindathu, justify orbital bombardments that killed their own troops, and measure victory in acceptable casualty percentages that dehumanized soldiers into statistics. Yeah, well, war has a way of making you question everything. The bugs taught me that. They don't hate us, don't fear us, don't even really see us as enemies. We're just biomass to be consumed. Makes all our political and religious conflicts seem pretty stupid in comparison. Perhaps that is the bugs' greatest threat, Entho said quietly. They remind us of our insignificance. We tell ourselves stories, great journeys, manifest destiny, divine purpose. The bugs tell no stories. They simply exist and expand. It is humbling. In the xenobiology lab, Dr. Chen worked alongside a Huragok engineer designated lighter than some, the floating, multi-tentacled creature that Covenant forces used for technical work. The Huragok couldn't speak, but it communicated through sign language and holographic projections that transcended linguistic barriers. "Can you show me how Covenant shields interact with bioelectric fields?" Chen asked. Lighter than some's tentacles flowed across a holographic interface, building complex 3-dimensional models that showed energy interactions at the quantum level. Chen watched in fascination. The Huragok understood physics intuitively, could visualize system interactions that would take human scientists months to calculate. "Wait," she said, pausing the display. "You're showing that brain bug psychic fields operate on the same frequency band as shield generators. That's why they could infiltrate your systems. They were literally operating on the same wavelength." Lighter than some's body pulsed in what might have been affirmation. More holographic displays appeared, showing potential countermeasures. Frequency modulation, psychic dampening fields, isolated system architectures that prevented network infiltration. "This is incredible," If we can shield our electronics from psychic interference, the brain bugs lose their biggest tactical advantage. Chen called over her shoulder. "Colonel Webb, we have a breakthrough." The combined research bore fruit faster than anyone anticipated. Within 3 weeks, the Joint Task Force had developed anti-chitin plasma rounds, Federation ammunition modified with Covenant plasma technology, capable of melting through Arachnid armor with single shots, psychic dampening fields, portable generators that blocked brain bug telepathy, forcing Arachnid swarms to revert to uncoordinated attack patterns, hybrid shield technology, personal energy barriers adapted from Covenant designs but manufactured using Federation industrial processes, expensive but effective, biological markers, synthetic pheromones that could confuse Arachnid coordination, making swarms attack each other or ignore actual threats. The technology was revolutionary. It was also dangerous in ways that went beyond simple warfare. In a private meeting, Admiral Kowalski confronted the reality that kept him awake at night. "Director Wells, we've just handed the Covenant technology that could make their invasion of human space unstoppable. These hybrid shields would protect their ground troops from our weapons. The anti-chitin rounds work just as well against armored humans as they do against bugs." Wells nodded grimly. "And the Covenant has given us plasma technology and shield designs that violate a dozen reverse engineering treaties. If our allies find out we're collaborating with the enemy, there'll be political consequences. So we have a weapon that's effective against bugs, but could be turned against both our species." Kowalski stared at the technical readouts. The classic prisoner's dilemma writ large. "With one difference," Wells said. "Both sides know the other has the same concerns. That creates a strange equilibrium. Neither can betray the other without exposing themselves to similar betrayal. It's mutually assured destruction, but with technology instead of nukes." Cold War doctrine. Lovely. Kowalski pulled up strategic projections. Fleet intelligence reports increased Arachnid activity in 14 sectors. They're expanding faster than we can track. We need to field test these new weapons, and we need to do it now. I'm proposing a joint operation, Federation and Covenant forces conducting a coordinated strike against a primary hive world. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. We've spent 3 weeks proving cooperation works in controlled laboratory conditions. Time to test it in actual combat. If it succeeds, we have a blueprint for combined operations. If it fails, he shrugged. At least we'll know what doesn't work. The target was designated Hive World Gamma 7, a planet the Arachnids had completely consumed. No native life remained. Just billions of bugs spread across 6 continents, all coordinated by a concentration of brain bugs in the planetary capital's ruins. It was a fortress that neither Federation nor Covenant could assault individually. Together, they might stand a chance. The assault force assembled in orbit. 20 Federation capital ships, 8 Covenant vessels, those whose crews had volunteered for the operation, and 5,000 troops split evenly between mobile infantry and Covenant warriors. It was the first time in history that human and alien forces had coordinated for a shared military objective. On the ground, as drop ships descended through hostile atmosphere, Sergeant Rico found himself in a drop pod alongside Entho Sraum and 3 other elites. The cultural clash was surreal. Humans strapped into crash harnesses while Sangheili stood secured by magnetic boots, their energy swords already ignited in anticipation of combat. "First time working with aliens?" Entho asked, his tone carrying dark humor. "First time working alongside aliens," Rico corrected. "Usually when I meet your kind, we're shooting at each other. Today we shoot at bugs. Tomorrow..." Entho shrugged, an oddly human gesture. "Tomorrow is tomorrow's problem. Today we survive. The drop pod hit atmosphere, and conversation became impossible as G-forces and heat turned the world into a screaming metal coffin. Rico had done this 100 times. The terror never got easier, but familiarity made it manageable. He glanced at the elites, expecting to see warrior stoicism. Instead, he saw Entho checking his plasma rifle with the same nervous energy every trooper displayed before combat. These aliens felt fear, prepared for death, hoped for survival, all the same biological imperatives that drove human soldiers. The revelation was simultaneously comforting and disturbing. If the Covenant were just soldiers following orders, believing in causes their leaders fed them, then they weren't so different from Federation troops. Which meant the war between their species was just two groups of scared warriors following orders to kill each other for reasons that seemed increasingly hollow. The drop pod slammed into Gamma 7's surface with bone-jarring force. The doors blew outward, and Rico charged into hell alongside warriors who'd been his mortal enemies 3 weeks ago. The bugs were waiting. They were always waiting. Hive World Gamma 7's surface was a nightmare of organic architecture. Where cities had once stood, there were now towering biostructures that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence, breeding spires, feeding pits, and massive tunnels that vented methane from underground chambers. The sky was choked with spores that made breathing through standard filters a labored affair. Every surface was covered in a thin film of organic resin that the Arachnids secreted to mark territory and facilitate movement. Rico's boot hit the ground, and immediately the resin tried to grip it. A minor inconvenience that became deadly when warrior bugs exploited the split-second delay. His squad fanned out in practiced formation, Morita rifles tracking for targets. The elites moved differently, more fluid, their 4 eyes giving them peripheral awareness humans lacked. But the objective was identical: establish a beachhead and push toward the primary hive structure 3 kilometers north. The bugs came in waves. Warrior bugs, each the size of a motorcycle, all chitin plates and slashing mandibles, erupted from concealed tunnels by the hundreds. Standard tactics would have been suppressing fire and tactical withdrawal. But this wasn't a standard operation. "Light them up!" Rico shouted, squeezing his trigger. The new anti-chitin plasma rounds performed exactly as advertised. Where normal ammunition required dozens of hits to penetrate bug armor, these rounds punched through with devastating efficiency. Warriors that would have required sustained fire from an entire squad dropped with single shots, their internal organs flash-cooked by superheated plasma cores. Entho's Shraum moved like liquid death beside him, energy sword carving through warriors that got too close, while his plasma rifle barked in disciplined 3-round bursts. "Your new ammunition is effective, Rico. Perhaps I was wrong about the Morita being a primitive weapon." "Don't get cocky." Rico dropped another warrior, then swore as a hopper bug, smaller, faster variant designed for aerial assault, dove at his position. His rifle tracked, fired, missed. An elite's energy sword bisected the hopper in midair, its 2 halves falling in different directions. The elite didn't break stride, already engaging the next target. The save had been casual, instinctive, the action of a warrior protecting his battle brother regardless of species. "Thanks," Rico shouted over the weapon's fire. The elite's only response was to toss him a plasma grenade. Rico caught it, armed it with the Covenant activation sequence he'd learned during training, and lobbed it into a cluster of emerging warriors. The explosion was beautiful and terrible. Blue-white plasma expanding in a perfect sphere that vaporized everything within 5 meters. Above them, the combined fleet engaged tanker bugs attempting to provide ground support. Federation destroyers laid down saturation fire, while Covenant cruisers used precision plasma torpedoes to eliminate specific targets. It was a reversal of their normal combat doctrines. humans providing suppression while aliens delivered surgical strikes. But it worked. Tanker bugs that would normally have devastated ground forces found themselves targeted by coordinated fire from ships that communicated in real time, sharing targeting data across species-specific systems that had been jury-rigged to interface. Advance by sections. Colonel Webb's voice came over comms. Primary objective is the central hive structure. Intelligence suggests that's where the brain bug concentration is highest. Kill the brains, the body dies. The combined force pushed forward in leapfrog advances, one unit providing covering fire, while another moved, human and Covenant intermixed out of tactical necessity. Rico's squad found themselves alongside a lance of Sangheili, led by Thel Vadami himself. The shipmaster fought with the controlled fury of a warrior who'd spent decades perfecting his craft, his energy sword a blue arc that drew lines of death through the Arachnid swarm. But the bugs adapted. New warrior variants emerged from deeper tunnels, these ones covered in heat-resistant plating that caused plasma rounds to ricochet. They moved in coordinated packs, surrounding isolated units and using numerical superiority to overwhelm shields and armor through sustained assault. They're learning, Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the science channel. The hive mind is processing our tactics in real time and spawning countermeasures. We're seeing evolutionary adaptation on timescales that should be impossible. A cluster of brain bugs, hidden in a collapsed structure 200 meters from Rico's position, pulsed with bioelectric coordination. They couldn't think in human terms, couldn't conceptualize strategy as individuals understood it, but they could process tactical data through the hive mind and spawn appropriate responses. Heat-resistant warriors to counter plasma, burrowing variants to attack from unexpected angles, acid spitters to dissolve energy shields through chemical rather than physical assault. Psychic dampeners, Thel Vadami ordered. Activate them now. Covenant engineers triggered portable generators that created interference fields across the battlefield. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Warrior bugs that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly broke formation, attacking randomly, even turning on each other as the pheromone signals became scrambled. But the dampeners had a critical flaw. They affected both brain bugs and Covenant communication systems. The energy shields flickered, weakened by the same interference that disrupted Arachnid coordination. It was a trade-off neither side had fully anticipated during laboratory testing. Shields at 40%, an elite warrior reported. The dampeners are... A warrior bug's mandibles punched through his weakened shield and into his chest. The elite fell, mandibles spread in a death cry, and two of his lancemates roared in fury, leaping forward to avenge him with a ferocity that transcended tactical wisdom. Rico saw the danger immediately. Don't break formation. You'll be... Too late. The elites charged into a kill zone, and warrior bugs swarmed them from 3 directions. Their energy swords carved through dozens of enemies, but there were always more. One elite went down under sheer weight of numbers. The second followed seconds later. Covering fire. Rico's squad opened up, their plasma rounds dropping warriors by the dozen. Federation forces and remaining Covenant warriors surged forward in a desperate rescue attempt, turning tactical advance into chaotic melee. In the madness of close combat, something remarkable happened. Species distinctions ceased to matter. A human trooper dragged a wounded Ungoi to safety. An elite provided covering fire for mobile infantry pinned by hopper attacks. Yayap, small, underestimated Yayap, used his intimate knowledge of Covenant equipment to hotwire a damaged portable shield generator, creating a temporary barrier that saved a dozen human lives. The battle became a grinding exchange where old prejudices died under the weight of immediate survival necessity. You didn't care about religious doctrine when a warrior bug was trying to take your head off. You didn't care about species politics when the soldier next to you, human or alien, was the only thing between you and death. Colonel Webb coordinated the assault from an armored command vehicle, watching tactical displays that showed combined forces penetrating deeper into the hive structure than either species had ever managed individually. All units, we're 50 meters from the primary brain bug concentration. Prepare for final assault. This is where it gets ugly. The central chamber was a cathedral of biological horror. Brain bugs, 17 of them, floated in a pool of nutrient fluid, their bulbous heads connected by pulsing tendrils that created a neural network. Around them, warrior bugs formed defensive rings 10 deep, and hovering above were flying variants that could spit acid with sniper-like precision. Thel Vadami assessed the tactical situation with the cold calculation of a veteran commander. We cannot fight through that defense, not with our current forces and ammunition supplies. Then we don't fight through it. Admiral Kowalski's voice came over fleet channels. We go over it, literally. Fleet, target that chamber with precision orbital strikes. Danger close. Our people are 30 meters from impact zone. Admiral, that'll kill our own troops, Colonel Webb protested. It'll kill some of our troops, Kowalski corrected grimly. But if we don't eliminate those brain bugs, they'll adapt to every weapon we've developed. This is our one chance. All ground forces, you have 60 seconds to clear the blast radius. Move! The order was mathematically sound and morally horrifying. Rico understood immediately. They'd been bait, drawing the brain bugs into a concentrated position where orbital strikes could be effective. Acceptable casualties, measured and planned. Fall back, he shouted. Everyone, full retreat. We have incoming. The combined force ran, not in disciplined tactical withdrawal, but in full sprint for survival, carrying wounded, abandoning heavy equipment, driven by the primal understanding that death was incoming from above. Some didn't make it, caught by pursuing warrior bugs, too injured to move fast enough or simply unlucky in their positioning. Rico saw an elite stumble, his leg torn by bug mandibles. Without thinking, he grabbed the warrior and hauled him forward, the elite's weight nearly toppling them both. Entho appeared on the other side, supporting his comrade's other arm. Together, human and alien, they dragged their wounded brother toward safety. The orbital strike hit with apocalyptic force. Covenant plasma torpedoes and Federation kinetic penetrators converged on the brain bug chamber simultaneously. The structure vaporized in a pillar of superheated destruction that reached into the sky like the finger of an angry god. The shockwave threw Rico and his companions forward, slamming them into the ground with bone-jarring impact. When the world stopped spinning, Rico dragged himself upright. His armor was scorched, his ribs probably cracked, his hearing reduced to high-pitched ringing. But he was alive. Next to him, Entho pulled himself up with similar difficulty. The wounded elite they'd rescued was unconscious, but breathing. Behind them, the central hive structure was gone, replaced by a crater of molten glass and vaporized chitin. The brain bugs were dead, all 17 of them eliminated in a single coordinated strike. And across Gamma 7, warrior bugs suddenly lost coordination. They continued attacking, but without the hive mind's guidance, they reverted to simple predatory behavior. Packs turned on each other. Others fled back into tunnels. Some simply stood still, their neural connections severed, waiting for commands that would never come. All units, the brain bugs are confirmed eliminated. Colonel Webb's voice came over comms, barely audible through the ringing in Rico's ears. Mop-up operations commencing. Secondary teams will clear remaining bug populations. Primary assault force, you're ordered to extract. You've done enough." Rico looked around at the survivors. His squad of 20 was down to 11. The Covenant lance that had fought beside them had lost half their warriors. But they'd achieved something unprecedented. They'd assaulted a primary hive world and won. Not through overwhelming force or technological superiority alone, but through coordination that transcended species boundaries. The extraction dropships descended through smoke and spore-choked atmosphere. Human and Covenant troops loaded together, too exhausted to maintain the careful separation of earlier operations. Rico found himself sitting next to Thel Vadami, both warriors too tired for anything but silence. Finally, Thel spoke. "Your admiral sacrificed dozens of troops, both species, to eliminate the brain bugs. It was tactically correct, but morally difficult." "Yeah," Rico said tiredly. "That's the Federation way. Acceptable casualties. Win at any cost. Sometimes I wonder if we're any different from the bugs, just consuming resources and territory until we meet something that can stop us." The Covenant taught similar doctrine. Victory through overwhelming force. Sacrifice of lesser castes for the greater good. Thel's mandibles worked in what might have been bitter amusement. "We are not so different, Rico. Both are civilizations built on foundations that value results over individual lives." "Maybe," Rico acknowledged. "But today, I saw an elite risk his life to save humans. I saw Yayap, a grunt your people treated as expendable, save a dozen troopers by jury-rigging equipment under fire. I saw humans and Covenant fighting not as two separate armies, but as one force with a common goal. That's got to count for something." "It counts for survival," Thel said. "But whether it counts for more than that, whether this cooperation can outlast immediate necessity, that remains to be seen." The dropship lifted off, carrying survivors away from Gamma 7's dying surface. Below them, cleanup crews began the grim work of securing the planet and establishing the first joint Federation-Covenant base on reclaimed territory. In orbit, Admiral Kowalski reviewed casualty reports with Director Wells. 3,000 troops dead or missing, 1,700 human, 1,300 Covenant. By bug war standards, it was a remarkably low casualty rate for a primary hive assault. "We won," Wells said. "First major victory against a fully developed hive world. The joint doctrine works." "We won a battle," Kowalski corrected. "The war is far from over, and we still have the political problem. What happens when this cooperation becomes public? When citizens find out we're working with the aliens who've been glassing our colonies? Or when Covenant civilians learn their warriors are fighting alongside the heretics the prophets declared must be exterminated?" Wells pulled up intelligence reports from Covenant space. "Our sources indicate the prophets are furious about this operation. They're demanding the return of stolen warriors and threatening to escalate military action if we don't comply." "Let them threaten. Every day this cooperation continues is another day both species learn to fight the real enemy." Kowalski stared at the tactical display, showing Gamma 7, a world cleansed of Arachnid infestation for the first time in 5 years. "We proved something today, Director. We proved that two civilizations at war can still cooperate when survival demands it. That's worth whatever political hell is coming." But political hell was indeed coming, and it would test whether the fragile alliance forged in combat could survive the pressures of religious dogma, political ambition, and the fundamental question: when the immediate threat was contained, would old hatreds resurface? Or had something genuinely new been created? The answer would be written in blood, diplomacy, and the choices of soldiers who'd learned to see enemies as allies. High Charity hung in space like a divine monument to theocratic power, its mushroom-shaped superstructure housing billions of Covenant citizens and the religious hierarchy that governed them. In the inner sanctum, where the three Prophet Hierarchs convened, the atmosphere was charged with barely suppressed fury. The Prophet of Truth reviewed the reports from Gamma 7 with calculated rage hidden behind his ornate mask. 60,000 warriors, our warriors, fighting alongside the heretics, sharing technology, developing joint military doctrine. This is not merely defeat. This is betrayal of the most fundamental kind. The Prophet of Regret's anti-gravity throne circled the chamber with agitated energy. Fleet Master Voro Manticree refused extraction. Shipmaster Thel Vadami openly collaborates with humans. The Sangheili have always been prideful, but this transcends pride. This is heresy. Or pragmatism, the Prophet of Mercy said quietly, his ancient voice carrying weight that made the other hierarchs pause. The reports indicate the Arachnid threat is more widespread than our intelligence suggested. Perhaps the Sangheili see what we have been reluctant to acknowledge, that the great journey may be threatened by an enemy that cares nothing for our faith. Truth's eyes, hidden behind ceremonial coverings, would have shown calculation cold enough to freeze stars. The great journey is absolute. It cannot be threatened by mindless insects or wayward warriors. What threatens us is doubt, the cancer that spreads when warriors make decisions based on tactical convenience rather than religious certainty. He activated a holographic display showing the political landscape of the Covenant. Red zones indicated Sangheili-controlled fleets and territories. Blue showed Jiralhanae influence. The map was a patchwork that grew more divided with each passing week. The Sangheili have served for 3 millennia. Truth continued, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy. But service built on pride rather than faith is vulnerable to corruption. The Jiralhanae, by contrast, serve with absolute loyalty. They do not question. They do not negotiate with heretics. They obey. Regret understood the implication immediately. You propose replacing the Sangheili entirely? I propose accelerating what has already begun. Truth pulled up military deployment orders. Assign Jiralhanae leadership to all fleets operating in contested space. Recall Sangheili commanders to high charity for debriefing. Once concentrated, we can neutralize the political threat they represent. The great schism the prophets have long anticipated will come, but on our terms, in our timing. Mercy's aged face showed conflict. To engineer civil war within the Covenant, the casualties would be catastrophic. Billions could die. Billions have died in the great journey's name already. Truth said coldly. What matters is that faithful survive to complete the pilgrimage. If the Sangheili have lost their faith, they have lost their purpose. Better to excise the cancer now than let it spread. The decision was made. Orders went out across Covenant space, carefully worded to seem like routine reassignments, but designed to separate Sangheili warriors from their support networks and concentrate them where they could be eliminated efficiently. The Great Schism, the civil war that would tear the Covenant apart, was no longer prophecy. It was operational doctrine. On Sanctuary, in the Joint Task Force facility, Lieutenant Marquez received encrypted intelligence from deep-cover Federation agents operating in Covenant territory. She read the reports twice, then immediately requested an emergency meeting with Admiral Kowalski and Shipmaster Thel Vadami. The prophets are planning a purge, she said without preamble, displaying the intelligence on a secure holographic projector. They're recalling Sangheili commanders under the guise of debriefings, but our sources indicate it's preparation for mass executions. The cooperation we've built here has made your entire species vulnerable to political retaliation. Thel studied the data with the detached calm of a warrior who'd always known this day would come. The prophets fear what they cannot control. Sangheili who fight alongside humans demonstrate that faith alone is insufficient for survival. that undermines the entire religious foundation of the Covenant. His mandibles tightened. How many warriors will they sacrifice to maintain their lie? Our estimates suggest millions if they succeed in concentrating Sangheili forces in controlled locations. Kowalski pulled up tactical projections. Shipmaster, we can offer asylum. Every Covenant warrior currently in Federation custody could be granted protected status. It's not much, but it is prison with a different name. Thel interrupted, not unkindly. No, Admiral. If the Prophets have decided to eliminate the Sangheili as a political force, then the Sangheili must respond, not with surrender, but with resistance. He turned to his second-in-command, Enthos Raum, who'd fought beside Rico on Gamma 7. Send word to all Sangheili warriors in Federation custody. They have a choice: accept asylum and live as refugees, or join a resistance against the Prophet's betrayal. That's civil war, Marquez said. You're talking about splitting the Covenant down the middle. The Covenant is already split, Thel corrected. The Prophets simply refuse to acknowledge it. For 3,000 years, the Sangheili served faithfully. We conquered worlds in their name. We died for their great journey. And now, because we dare to make tactical decisions that contradict religious dogma, they plan our extermination. His voice carried steel wrapped in barely controlled fury. If they want war, we will give them war. But not alone. We will need allies. The implications hung in the air, like plasma before detonation. Kowalski understood immediately what Thel was proposing: formal military alliance between the Federation and rebel Covenant forces. It would fundamentally reshape the galactic power structure. I don't have authority to make that decision, Kowalski said. This goes to the Security Council, probably to the civilian government. The political complications will be irrelevant if either the Prophets succeed in their purge or the Arachnids continue their expansion unchecked. Thel interrupted. Admiral, I have spent weeks fighting beside your soldiers. I have seen humans sacrifice themselves to save Covenant warriors. I have watched species cooperation achieve victories neither could accomplish alone. Whatever our past conflicts, the present reality is clear. We have common enemies and compatible objectives. Alliance is not merely advantageous, it is necessary. 3 days later, the Federation Security Council convened an emergency session. The debate was fierce, splitting along predictable lines. Hardliners demanded that all Covenant personnel be interned indefinitely. They were enemies, regardless of internal Covenant politics. Pragmatists argued that supporting Sangheili rebellion would destabilize the Covenant and reduce pressure on Federation territories. Idealists spoke of moral obligations to refugees fleeing religious persecution. The Sky Marshal, Supreme Military Commander, and the voice that ultimately mattered, listened to all arguments before rendering judgment. Gentlemen and ladies, we are losing the war against the Arachnids. Not today, not this month, but the trajectory is clear. They breed faster than we can kill them, adapt faster than we can develop countermeasures, and expand across more territory than we can defend. The Covenant possesses technology that could shift this balance. Sangheili warriors have proven themselves effective allies in combined operations. He pulled up casualty reports from Gamma 7. Our losses in that operation were 60% lower than projected for a solo assault. That's not statistical noise. That's the difference between victory and defeat. He paused, letting the numbers speak for themselves. I am authorizing formal military alliance with Sangheili resistance forces, not with the Covenant, with the Sangheili specifically. We will provide weapons, intelligence, logistical support, and sanctuary for refugees. In exchange, they provide tactical expertise, advanced technology, and coordinated military operations against both Covenant loyalists and Arachnid expansion. This is not friendship. This is survival mathematics. The decision passed by narrow margin. Within hours, diplomatic channels opened between Federation Command and Sangheili leadership. The alliance was formalized in a document that carefully avoided terms like friendship or trust, focusing instead on mutual defense pacts, technology sharing agreements, and rules of engagement that both species could accept. On Hesperus, in the Joint Task Force facility, Sergeant Rico found himself standing in formation alongside Enthos Shroum as the alliance was officially announced to combined forces. The ceremony was brief, pragmatic, stripped of the pomp that usually accompanied such moments. Admiral Kowalski and Shipmaster Thel Vadami shook hands, a human gesture that Thel had learned meant commitment, and signed the accord on behalf of their respective forces. "Think this'll actually work?" Rico asked quietly. "For now," Entho replied. "We share enemies. That creates temporary unity. But when those enemies are defeated, if they are defeated, then we will see whether humans and Sangheili can coexist without external threats forcing cooperation." Pessimistic. Realistic. We have fought each other for decades. Our species have incompatible territorial claims, different resource requirements, conflicting philosophical frameworks. Alliance born from desperation is fragile. Entho's mandibles spread in what Rico had learned was a sardonic smile. But fragile is better than nothing. And who knows? Perhaps our children will remember that we fought together before we fought against each other. Perhaps that memory will be enough to prevent total war. "You have kids?" "3 younglings on Sanghelios. I have not seen them in 2 years." Entho's voice carried the weight of every soldier's sacrifice. "I fight so they might live in a galaxy where survival does not require constant warfare. Whether I succeed?" He shrugged. "That is for future generations to determine." The Alliance's first test came faster than anyone anticipated. Covenant loyalist forces, now dominated by Jiralhanae leadership, launched a coordinated assault on 3 Sangheili colonies that had declared independence. The attacks were brutal, designed to send a message. Rebellion would be met with extermination. The Federation response was immediate. 12 battle groups jumped to the contested systems, arriving alongside Sangheili defense fleets. The engagement was chaotic, violent, and ultimately decisive. Jiralhanae forces, accustomed to fighting technologically inferior humans, found themselves facing coordinated fire from enemies who understood Covenant weapon systems intimately. Federation nuclear weapons disabled Covenant shields, while Sangheili plasma torpedoes exploited the vulnerability. Within 6 hours, the Loyalist assault was repelled with catastrophic losses. But victory came with a cost. The Prophets declared holy war, not just against humans, but against Sangheili heretics who'd broken faith with the Great Journey. The Covenant fractured along species lines, with Ungoi forced to choose sides, Kigyar mercenaries selling their loyalty to the highest bidder, and Megalic Golo colonies splitting their support based on ancient bond partnerships. The galaxy descended into 3-way conflict that made previous wars seem small by comparison. Covenant loyalists led by Jiralhanae and the Prophets, the Sangheili Federation Alliance, and the ever-expanding Arachnid infestation that consumed territory from all sides. Director Wells summarized the situation in a classified briefing. "We're fighting the war we wanted, Covenant split and weakened, but also the war we feared, Arachnid expansion accelerating unchecked. Every resource we commit to supporting Sangheili rebels is a resource not used for bug containment. We're bleeding from 2 wounds simultaneously, and I'm not sure we can stanch both. But there were unexpected advantages. Sangheili engineers began teaching Federation scientists the principles behind energy shield technology. Human industrial capacity started mass-producing plasma weapons using techniques that would have taken decades to develop independently. The hybrid anti-chitin rounds that had proven so effective on Gamma-7 were deployed to front-line units across both civilizations. And perhaps most importantly, soldiers who'd fought together, humans and Sangheili, Ungoi and Marines, began to see each other as comrades rather than enemies. It wasn't universal. Prejudice and hatred didn't evaporate overnight. But in the crucible of combat against an enemy that threatened them equally, old certainties began to crack. In the ruins of a bug-infested colony world, Rico's squad and Entho's lance cleared a tunnel network together. They developed wordless coordination born from dozens of joint operations, humans providing suppression fire, while elites closed for melee, plasma, and bullets, working in concert to maximum effect. When they cleared the final chamber and confirmed no surviving Arachnids, Entho extended his hand in the human gesture of camaraderie. Rico clasped it. Elite and human, former enemies, current allies, uncertain future companions. "We survived another one," Rico said. "Indeed, and tomorrow we will survive another. Until eventually..." Entho didn't finish the thought. Both warriors understood. Either they'd survive long enough to see the threats eliminated, or they'd die trying. There was no third option. Above them, in orbit, the combined fleet prepared for the next jump. Federation destroyers and Sangheili cruisers flying in mixed formations that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. The galaxy had changed, is changing, would continue changing in ways none of them could predict. The prophets had wanted to exterminate humanity and preserve the Covenant's religious purity. Instead, they'd engineered a civil war that fractured their civilization and forced both sides to adapt or die. The Arachnids continued their expansion, neither knowing nor caring about the political upheavals consuming the species that tried to stop them. And the Federation, built on pragmatism and acceptable casualties, had found unlikely allies in warriors who valued honor above obedience. The outcome remained uncertain. But for the first time in 5 years of total war, there was something resembling hope. Not the naive hope of easy victory, but the grim hope of warriors who'd found strength in unity against overwhelming odds. Shipmaster Thel Vadame stood on the bridge of the Pious Inquisitor, no longer serving the prophets, now allied with humans, commanding a mixed crew that included both species. He looked at the tactical displays showing Arachnid territory, Covenant loyalist positions, and the fragile alliance's defensive lines. "Set course for the next contested system," he ordered. "We have worlds to defend and enemies to face. And perhaps, just perhaps, we will forge something new from the ashes of old hatreds. A galaxy where survival does not require extermination, where cooperation transcends species, where warriors of honor can find purpose beyond endless war." It was the closest thing to optimism a veteran soldier could afford. And it would have to be enough. The galaxy would remember the Battle of P7743 not for its tactical significance, though historians would debate its strategies for generations, but for what it represented. The moment 3 apex predator civilizations collided and discovered that survival sometimes required cooperation with enemies. In the months that followed, the Sangheili Federation alliance achieved what neither species could have accomplished alone. Bug hive worlds that had resisted years of assault fell to coordinated strikes, combining human industrial capacity with Covenant technological superiority. Loyalist Covenant forces, weakened by internal civil war, found themselves fighting defensive actions rather than offensive crusades. The Prophet's grand vision of a united Covenant, achieving the Great Journey, fractured into dozens of competing factions, each claiming religious authority while bleeding resources in endless conflict. But the cost was measured in millions of lives, across all species. Federation colonies glassed by loyalist fleets in acts of desperate retaliation. Sangheili worlds torn apart by civil war as families chose between ancient faith and pragmatic survival. Entire star systems consumed by Arachnid expansion, while the galaxy's powers fought each other instead of the common threat. On Sanctuary, in a memorial garden built to honor fallen soldiers of both species, Sergeant Johnny Rico stood beside Fleet Master Voro Manticree, the Sangheili commander who'd refused extraction and chosen honor over expedience. Around them, names were carved into stone. Human and Covenant, soldiers who died fighting together against enemies neither could have defeated alone. "Do you think it was worth it?" Rico asked quietly. "All the death, all the sacrifice, all the compromises we made?" Voro's mandibles worked thoughtfully. "Worth is measured against alternatives. If we had continued fighting each other while the Arachnids expanded, both species would face extinction within decades. If the Prophets had succeeded in their purge, the Sangheili would be enslaved or exterminated. If your Federation had rejected alliance, you would still be fighting with 20th century weapons against plasma technology." He gestured at the memorial stones. "These warriors died so others might live. That is the only worth that matters in war." The alliance was fragile, built on necessity rather than affection, maintained through constant negotiation and compromise that satisfied no one completely. Human politicians complained about resource allocation to alien refugees. Sangheili traditionalists raged about warriors serving alongside heretics. The Ungoi, caught between factions, simply tried to survive, their species' historical role as expendable labor giving way to something more complex as both sides recognized their value. But the fragile alliance held, because the alternative was extinction. Lieutenant Marquez, promoted to commander for her intelligence work, stood before the Security Council presenting long-term projections. The Arachnid expansion has slowed but not stopped. They adapt to our combined weapons, requiring constant innovation. The Covenant civil war continues to bleed both sides. We estimate another 5 years of combined operations before we achieve strategic stability. And that's optimistic. The pessimistic projection is ongoing three-way conflict for decades. "And the cost?" a counselor asked. "Measured in generations. Soldiers who fight alongside former enemies, raising children who'll never know a galaxy where humans and Sangheili weren't allies. Cultural exchange that slowly erodes old hatreds. Interspecies cooperation becoming normalized rather than exceptional." Marquez paused. "Or it fails. The alliance fractures, old wars resume, and we discover that temporary cooperation couldn't overcome fundamental incompatibility." The counselor nodded slowly. "So we're gambling our civilization's future on the hope that survival instinct outweighs centuries of conflict?" "Yes, sir. That's exactly what we're doing." On High Charity, now contested territory as Sangheili rebels fought for control of the Holy City, the Prophet of Truth watched his grand vision crumble. The Great Journey had been the Covenant's unifying purpose for millennia. Now it was a lie that no one believed, a promise that rang hollow against the reality of species extinction. The Jiralhanae, who he'd elevated to replace the Sangheili, proved too brutish for the political subtlety required. The Sangheili, whom he'd tried to eliminate, had found new purpose alongside their former enemies. In his final transmission before Sangheili forces breached the inner sanctum, Truth's words carried the weight of failed prophecy. "We sought transcendence through faith. We found only the universe's cold indifference to our beliefs. The Great Journey was always a lie, not because the Forerunners didn't exist, but because belief alone cannot protect against threats that evolution has refined for pure consumption. The humans understood this. The Sangheili learned it. I refused to see. The Prophet's reign ended not with divine ascension, but with plasma fire in a holy city turned battlefield. The Covenant, as a unified theocratic empire, ceased to exist. In its place rose dozens of successor states, some allied with the Federation, others clinging to old doctrines, all struggling to survive in a galaxy that no longer offered simple answers. Aboard the Ticonderoga, Admiral Kowalski reviewed the strategic situation with Director Wells one final time before his retirement. 5 years of total war had aged him beyond his years, but his eyes remained sharp. "We didn't win," he said. "We just survived long enough to change the rules of the game." "Is there a difference?" Wells asked. "Maybe not. But I like to think there is. Winning suggests a clear endpoint. Survival just means you live to fight another day." He pulled up the latest casualty reports. Numbers that would have been catastrophic by any previous war's standards, but were considered acceptable by bug war metrics. "We sacrificed millions to save billions. We allied with enemies to fight a greater threat. We compromised every principle except survival itself. And somehow, we're still here. The historians will judge whether we made the right choices. Let them judge. I made the choices I could live with. That's all any commander can do." On a reclaimed colony world where humans and Sangheili now lived in uneasy proximity, children of both species played in streets that had been bug-infested battlefields months earlier. They didn't understand the political complexities, the religious schisms, the centuries of conflict their parents carried. They simply knew that the tall aliens with mandibles could teach them games humans had never invented, and the short humans with their rapid speech patterns had their own stories to share. It was a small thing, insignificant in the scope of galactic warfare. But perhaps it was enough. Perhaps survival, simple, stubborn survival, would prove more powerful than prophecy or doctrine or all the certainties that had driven civilizations to mutual destruction. The multiverse is infinite, filled with countless realities where different choices were made. In some, humanity and the Covenant destroyed each other, while the Arachnids consumed the galaxy. In others, the prophets succeeded in their purge, and religious purity was maintained until extinction made it irrelevant. In still others, the bugs evolved faster than any alliance could counter, reducing all advanced civilizations to biological resources for hive expansion. But in this reality, this singular thread in the infinite tapestry, 3 species learned a hard lesson: that survival sometimes requires setting aside everything you believe to work with everything you hate. That old enemies can become necessary allies. That the galaxy cares nothing for religious doctrine or political ideology or species pride. It simply continues, and those who adapt survive, while those who don't become fossils and cautionary tales. The war continued. It would always continue, because that was the nature of existence in a hostile universe. But the galaxy had changed, was changing, would continue changing in ways none of them could predict. And perhaps, just perhaps, that change was itself a form of victory.